Chapter 1261. Of course, the big octopus could see Han Fei, but in its eyes, Han Fei was just a peak-level sea spirit. At this level, it could suck him to death with one tentacle. Han Fei didn't panic at all. Without the suppression of the power of extreme cold, all of his techniques could be said to be undone. No matter how powerful this giant octopus was, what could it do? He had the old tortoise, the fish Tao-seeking, and himself. If he put in a bit more effort, it would be equivalent to 3.5 venerables. How could he not even kill an octopus? Little Black and Little White made breakthroughs very fast. When the octopus approached, Han Fei had already heard a crisp sound of a breakthrough. From then on, Little Black and Little White finally entered the sea spirit realm. However, to Han Fei's surprise, why didn't they enforce the law? Didn't spiritual beasts need to enforce the law? However, Han Fei didn't check their progress for the time being, because the big octopus was already here. A string of information emerged in Han Fei's eyes. Name Virtual White Zhang. Introduction. A special creature that exists between reality and illusion. The illusory Bai Zhang can fall into the dark void at any time, and space has no effect on it. He was adept at concealment and attacking from the void. 1 attack on the soul, 2 attacks on the body. He was extremely difficult to deal with. He was good at regrowing limbs, and his escaping speed was extremely fast. Level 77 Law Enforcement. Void Tentacle, Void Eye Quality. Legendary Spiritual Energy greater than 975,689 points. Effect. There is a certain chance to comprehend the secret laws of space. Collectible, none. Absorbable. Han Fei took a look and immediately understood. Although this giant octopus wasn't weak, it was still far from being comparable to the tri-light blazing cold shrimp. Void. Han Fei couldn't help but smile. The heavenly illusionary divine walking art was practiced in such an environment. You want to play with me? Without waiting for Old Turtle and Fish to ask, Han Fei stepped into the illusion, punched out, and the sacrificing punch burst out. The big octopus was shocked by Han Fei's move. The big octopus thought to itself, half of my body is in the void. Why are you here? Looking at Han Fei's terrifying punch, as a creature with 3 hearts and 9 brains, he was shocked. Once the enemy made a move, it would be clear whether or not there was one. The first thing this illusory Bai Zhang did was choose to flee. Han Fei sneered. Do you think I'll let you run away? Whoosh. In the void, as soon as the 2 tentacles of the giant octopus drilled into the void fissure, it felt a life-threatening crisis. The octopus turned its head and shot out a beam of white light at Han Fei. Han Fei was slightly shocked. Do octopuses all have laser eyes? However, this was not a special environment, so Han Fei dodged it easily. In fact, he didn't even need to use stellar transposition. Now that he had become an explorer, the phantom glass wings would no longer grow. However, his infinite flash ability could still easily avoid this kind of light. Back then, the 9-headed snake grass's laser was truly ruthless. It was like a F*King infrared ray blasting everywhere. Without giving the virtual Bai Zhang a chance to continue attacking, Han Fei directly appeared beside it, clasped one of its tentacles with one hand, and held it tightly with the needless thread. Pung pung. When he grabbed the big octopus, he saw that the 2 tentacles that went deep into the space crack suddenly broke. Instantly, Han Fei felt that the vitality of the big octopus was reduced by 30%. The old turtle replied, some of them escaped. Han Fei was speechless. Was this octopus a gecko? Geckos had short tails to survive, but so did it. However, while geckos ran with their bodies, this octopus ran with its tails. Of course, about 1/3 of the octopus had escaped, and there were still 2 hearts and 7 brains left. The creatures that could live under the ice god gorge must have strong souls. Not to mention that the virtual Bai Zhang was a legendary creature, it was level 77, which was also an advanced Tao-seeking realm creature. It was not that Han Fei couldn't control it, But the problem was that with so many brains, it was very difficult for Han Fei to control it. Swish! Suddenly, a streak of white suddenly appeared. It was none other than Little White. In fact, Little White was not the only one who came. Little Black also came, but Little Black was too dark at this moment and Han Fei didn't notice it. When Han Fei took a closer look, Little Black had bitten one of the virtual Bai Zhang's tentacles. Little White also seemed to have a new ability. It opened its mouth and spurted out a stream of white gas, but the big octopus stiffened for a while. However, the effect made Han Fei speechless. Little Black ground its teeth on the tentacle but didn't bite it. He could only hear a harsh, sizzling sound. Little White's original intention should be to freeze the big octopus. Han Fei felt very cold, and the big octopus also stiffened for a while. But this strength was not enough at all. It was many times weaker than the actual strength of this ice or whatever. Han Fei was speechless. "My dear girl, do you still not know how to use it?" "Humph," the old turtle said, "what it ate was a natural spiritual treasure. But don't you also have a sea-quelling bizarre treasure? Can you exert its strength?" Han Fei was speechless. So that's what happened. It turned out that the ice sand was not weak, but the power that Little White could exert was too weak. Han Fei couldn't help but laugh and summon Little Fatty out again. However, as soon as Little Fatty came out, its body began to freeze, and it hurriedly shouted, I'll go back, for Little Black and Little White." Maybe because they were special, the freezing power had no effect on them at all, and even the source of the ice was swallowed by Little White. But Little Fatty's strength was still very low. It hadn't even reached level 50. With a swish, Han Fei ignited his spiritual fire and wrapped it around Little Fatty. "There's a member of your clan here. Suck some blood from him." Little Fatty couldn't perceive the strength of an advanced Tao-seeking state creature. Seeing that there was a strong member of its clan, it immediately crawled over. However, Little Fatty sucked so hard that its body began to tremble, and it couldn't suck out a single drop of essence blood. Little Fatty said, "Master, can you cut it open?" Han Fei curled his lip. "Now you know how to call me master?" The infinity water turned into a knife and cut crazily. The fate of this illusory white octopus had been decided. Little Fatty immediately became excited. When its essence blood was sucked away for the first time, it said, "I'm going to make a breakthrough later." Han Fei thought, "It's only natural for you to make a breakthrough. You've been stuck for a long time." At this moment, Han Fei finally had the time to check the information of Little Black and Little White. In his eyes, information popped up. Name twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish. Introduction. This is a descendant of the mysterious ancient yin-yang sky-swallowing fish. The black and white fish live together. The white fish is docile, and the black fish is brutal. They are symbiotic. As long as one of them survives, the other won't die. Level 61 quality, mysterious stored spiritual energy greater than 100 million points, evolving, food omnivorous, can swallow anything, combat skills, supreme yin-yang wheel, spirit swallowing body, fusion, Gemini divine technique. Remarks: the blackfish is invisible. Except for the master, only the yin-yang divine eyes born by nature can see through it. After the fusion, its combat power will be greatly increased, and it will be comparable to a divine weapon. Contains soul energy greater than 6,506 points. This time, Han Fei was a little stunned. They had only broken through to the sea spirit state, hadn't they? But the amount of stored spiritual energy suddenly soared to 100 million? Besides, after this breakthrough, Little Black and Little White directly passed level 60 and seemed to have stabilized their realm in the sea spirit state. Could it be that their previous accumulation was deep enough? Of course, in any case, Little Black and Little White had definitely become much stronger. What kind of life form could cause a high-level Tao-seeking realm life form to stiffen when they had just entered the sea spirit realm? Which living being would dare to hug the tentacle of a high-level Tao-seeking realm cultivator and chew on it? Even if they couldn't chew on it, they would still chew on it, leaving rows of teeth marks. Not only that, Han Fei also found that Little Black and Little White had one more technique. Gemini Divine Technique? Han Fei said that the spirit-swallowing body was almost a passive technique. The fusion technique had its drawbacks, so he rarely used it. At this moment, a new technique popped up. Could it be that every time Little Black and Little White advanced to a higher realm, a new technique would appear? Han Fei thought, since there's no one around, I have to give it a try, right? Then, Han Fei stabbed the big octopus a dozen times with snowmorn. It couldn't be more dead. Then, with a thought, he released Yu Wendao and ordered, "Kill all intruders." The old turtle was puzzled. "What are you doing?" Han Fei said, "Gemini Divine Technique." Since there was no one around, he might as well try it now. Just when Han Fei was ready to go all out and was ready to control the scene at any time, with a puff, Little Black and Little White directly turned into black smoke and white eyes. The two clouds of smoke entangled with each other. Huh! Han Fei was stunned. What's going on? Something that was known as a divine art was gone just like that? Han Fei couldn't help but glance at the corner of his mouth, not knowing what to do for a moment. However, the black and white smoke that Little Black and Little White turned into pounced at the big octopus. Han Fei was horrified by the pounce, because he saw that the octopus shriveled at a high speed. Surrounded by the black smoke, Little Black, who couldn't bite it a moment ago, was gnawing quickly. In Han Fei's perception, it didn't seem to be gnawing, but corroding. As for Little White, it was even more awesome. It swallowed a mass of soul. Based on Han Fei's experience, the soul of the big octopus should have dispersed, but part of it was still pulled out and swallowed by Little White. Little Fatty shrieked, "Mine? It's mine." Han Fei immediately said, "Stop." The old turtle was slightly shocked too. Is this the great technique that they awakened? They've already reached the Tao? That's impossible. How can it be? Hiss. Suddenly, the old turtle came to an abrupt stop as if he thought of something. Han Fei was stunned too. Looking at Little Black and Little White, who turned back into two fish, he asked in confusion, "Old Yuan, what's going on?" After a long silence, the old turtle said unhurriedly, Are these two fish really connate Taoism bodies?" The third chapter. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1262. Seeing the old turtle's surprise, Han Fei couldn't help but touch his head. What's wrong with the connate Taoist aptitude? Are they born with Taoist auras? Although Han Fei was excellent, he didn't know any of these secrets. The old turtle suddenly roared, "What do you know? I should have thought of it. There are very few people who can see your little black fish. Little white fish seems to only be able to absorb spiritual energy, but they can also carry essence." Han Fei interrupted, Okay, I know my son and daughter very well. Do I need you to brag? Just tell me, what's wrong with the connate Taoist aptitude? Is the connate Taoist aptitude very strong? The old turtle said gloomily, "The connate Taoist aptitude means that from the moment they are born by nature. They may be born in chaos, or in the rules of the great Tao, or by absorbing the essence of Taoist aura over the years. In short, they have entered the Tao since they were born. In this world, there is a unique great Tao waiting for them to walk on." A unique great Tao? The old turtle sneered. Yes, you heard it right. It is a unique great Tao. This is the power of the connate Taoist aptitude. Only the connate Taoist seed, the ancient Taoist seed, and those great Taos that no one has walked on but can go very far. The old tortoise said enviously, "I can tell you this about a creature of this level. As long as they don't die, they can become kings." Han Fei couldn't help but smile. "Old Yuan, don't brag. In all my life, the number of people I've seen, know, and become kings can be counted on one hand. There are billions of creatures in the two oceans. Since when did becoming a king become a joke?" The old tortoise smiled contemptuously. Vision determines everything. Your horizons are too narrow, and you're destined to have a narrow vision. You have to go out of this world and see the billions of creatures in this vast ocean. There are countless strong masters. Han Fei quickly interrupted. Stop, stop. I understand. Little Black and Little White have entered the Tao since they were born. It can also be said that their growth has always been according to their own great Tao? The old turtle let out a long and said, Not bad. Good. Han Fei swallowed. She definitely has a powerful background. Han Fei even wondered if he really got Little Black and Little White because of the calabash. But no matter what, this born Taoism aptitude was very strong. Looking at Little Fatty that was still absorbing the essence blood, Han Fei looked at Little Black and Little White, and then at their information. He couldn't help but mumble, Is the fusion technique really useless? Han Fei was a little confused. What if he performed the Gemini divine technique after fusing? With this idea in mind, Han Fei was immediately interested. He roared, Merge! When Han Fei, Little Black, and Little White fused into a big fish, Han Fei shouted again, Gemini divine technique. Buzz! Han Fei felt that his head went blank for a moment, and a piercing pain brought him back to himself. When Han Fei came back to his senses, he saw himself again for some reason. Although this wasn't the first time he had experienced such a feeling, it still felt a little weird. At this moment, Han Fei confirmed one thing. It was not that the fusion technique was useless, but that he hadn't unlocked Little Black and Little White's follow-up combat technique. For example, at this moment, Han Fei found that half of himself had turned into a black mist, and the other half into a white mist. At this moment, he found that the black mist was not really black mist, but an indescribable substance that made him want to eat something. When Han Fei rushed to the body of the big octopus, Little Fatty shouted again, It's mine! It's mine! Han Fei wanted to speak, but only his spiritual power trembled in the water. Your level is too low. You can only swallow one tentacle at most. Why are you panicking? When Han Fei curled up a tentacle, his perception changed at this moment. The black mist seemed to have been activated. Han Fei felt as if he had been split into thousands of parts, or that he was a whole, and that his body was full of sharp teeth. He, who had turned into a white mist, felt very cool and sensitive to souls. In the perception of the white mist, Han Fei found that there were 3 souls in all directions, which meant that there were at least 3 creatures nearby. All in all, it was a strange feeling. In any case, the octopus tentacle was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. What the hell am I? How can I show any divine technique? I can't even transform into a human being? As soon as Han Fei thought of this, the 2 bodies that were made of mist began to change shape and turned into 2 people in the blink of an eye. Huh! Han Fei looked at himself in shock. From Little Black's body, he had turned into a humanoid Han Fei, who was as strong as a junior explorer. From Little White's side, he was black. Not only his face, but even his eyes were black. From top to bottom, he couldn't see the slightest decoration on his body. He was pure black, a black that could even swallow light. Wow! 2 of me? The normal Han Fei and the black Han Fei both gasped at the same time. According to Han Fei's experience, although his soul was the same, it was essentially separated. Since it was separated, different souls could be used to do different things. Thinking of this, the 2 Han Feis looked at each other. External incarnation? Suddenly, the old turtle's voice sounded. Not an external incarnation. Otherwise, it's impossible for your soul to be split into 2, but I don't feel any change in your soul. The way I see it, your spirit is still one, because the little black fish and the little white fish are one in the first place. The normal Han Fei said, Not an external incarnation? Then why? I feel that there is a gap in strength. Let me try it. The 2 Han Feis clenched their fists, and the seawater shook and their strength burst out. Han Fei's eyelids twitched. A little weak. By rights, my strength has broken through to more than 200 waves at this moment, but now both of us feel that it's about 150 waves. The old turtle scoffed. Nonsense. Although your soul is still one, it has been used separately after all. Therefore, the comprehensive strength of a single body will inevitably decline. Han Fei couldn't wait to check his mind. Sure enough, both of them could see the information of the demon purification pot. In his eyes, information emerged. Owner Han Fei level greater than 70, Junior Explorer, Spiritual Energy 98654986654 Spiritual Power 13568/13568 Perception Range greater than 1000 kilometers Law Enforcer Invincible Strength greater than 148 waves 4 Little White 156 waves 4 Little Black First Spiritual Heritage Unknown Second Spiritual Heritage Unawakened First Spiritual Beast Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish Level 61 Second Spiritual Beast Unawakened Main Art Sky Stealing Technique Level 6 Avoid Fishing Venerable Level Divine Quality. Han Fei was shocked to find that what he saw were two sets of templates. For the different bodies of Little Black and Little White, the power information of the two sets of templates was only slightly different. In terms of strength, Little Black seemed to be born a little higher than Little White. Han Fei couldn't help but feel excited again. If these were two independent templates, did it mean that he could use different templates to carry out different cultivation? What was the difference between that and an external incarnation? Besides, although he had become two of himself, it seemed that neither of them was weak. Although they were not as strong as his original body, Han Fei knew very well that Little Black and Little White were only level 61 now. What if Little Black and Little White reached the Tao-seeking state? Han Fei couldn't help but breathe fast. That probably meant that when he performed the Gemini Divine Technique again, he could have at least twice the combat power of his original body. Oh no! Combat power statistics couldn't be calculated by just adding numbers. Under certain circumstances, the destructive power and threat produced by two true bodies and one true body might be two completely different concepts. For example, if he played a diversion trick with others, it would be very accurate. Another idea arose in Han Fei's mind. What if I hide in Forge the Universe? Swish. The normal Han Fei appeared in Forge the Universe, and the black Han Fei was still outside because he didn't have this idea. The black Han Fei was touching his chin, trying to find out if there was an entrance to Forge the Universe. This was the first time he had faced this situation. Half of him was hiding, and the other half was still outside. Seeing this, the old turtle couldn't help but mutter, I really don't know whether you are lucky or blessed by the Great Way. Although this technique is not an external incarnation, I'm afraid it is no worse than an external incarnation. Han Fei said, I think this is an external incarnation. The old turtle said, don't jump to conclusions too early. Fight with Yu Wendao without using spiritual energy. Han Fei nodded in his heart. That's true. Immediately, the two of them used Devil Change at the same time, but they didn't use the Overlord's technique. Mainly, Han Fei wanted to see if he could maintain the existence of these two bodies by himself. Yu Wendao was a half-venerable anyway. Han Fei ordered him to only block. In an instant, a battle broke out under the Ice God Gorge. Yu Wendao defended, and the two Han Feis attacked. After 100 minutes, Han Fei ran out of spiritual energy, so he grabbed from the void with his strength as an explorer. After half an hour, Han Fei felt a little tired, not physically, but mentally. More than half of his spiritual energy had been consumed. Half an hour later, when Han Fei's last trace of spiritual energy was consumed, the two bodies finally couldn't hold it anymore and collapsed into mist again. Then, Han Fei separated from Little Black and Little White. Not only did Han Fei feel that his mental state was extremely poor, but also Little Black and Little White's mental state was not good. Han Fei took out 7 or 8 spiritual fruits, threw a few to Little Black, ate a few himself, and immediately took Little Black and Little White back. And Little Fatty, with its eyes wide open, had been watching for a long time. No one knew what it was thinking, but Han Fei didn't think it understood. He heard the old turtle say, as Ben Huang expected. Although this technique is not an external incarnation, it may be a little stronger than an external sea god. At least an external incarnation needs to cultivate, but you don't even need to cultivate. Even I envy you. Chapter 1263. Han Fei's head was swollen. The old turtle was right. This was not an external incarnation. However, Han Fei still had a lot of things to test. Now, he just tested that in the case of battle, two of him could exist for half an hour. But what if it was not a battle but a cultivation? Han Fei felt that there was still a lot of room for research in this. In addition to cultivation, if one of them died, then which part of the soul would be crushed? Or would it be the same as Little Black and Little White? As long as one side didn't die, the other would return? Of course, this was not easy to test. Han Fei felt that the other half of him would definitely not die. After all, the other half of him was still alive. However, something like a divine soul could never be determined. What if it was captured by someone else? For example, his void lines, possession, and the means to restrain the soul? For this kind of thing, it was better to believe that it existed than not. If he really encountered it, he would try it later. Taking advantage of this time, Little Fatty was desperately sucking the other half's essence blood. Han Fei's spiritual power was also weak. He quickly took out the god-scaring painting and visualized it again. During the years in the Wind and Rain Village, Han Fei basically did nothing else. Except pretending to be a master, he basically spent the rest of his time cultivating the god-scaring painting. Meanwhile, the range of his perception also increased rapidly. Until he successfully passed the tribulation, his perception range had reached an astonishing more than 1,900 kilometers. Han Fei wasn't very clear about this range. Logically speaking, as an explorer, 1,000 kilometers should be enough, right? When he killed an intermediate Tao-seeking state great demon in the domain of ice, the other party's perception range seemed to be more than 800 kilometers. Han Fei was very sure that it was definitely less than 1,000 kilometers. Besides, there was a big difference between him and other experts in the same realm. His growth was too fast. On the other hand, ordinary explorers might spend hundreds, or even thousands of years to become explorers. How many years had it been? 25 years? Of course, Han Fei knew that the strength of the soul could be increased through visualization. Therefore, even in the same realm, there was no specific range. Whose divine soul was stronger? No one except himself would know, let alone tell others. Just like this god-scaring painting, Han Fei had already remembered half of it. At this time, a big spear had been revealed. Yes, it was a gun. Han Fei had identified it carefully and found that the spear in the god-scaring painting had two blades on both sides, which were as thin as cicada wings, and a wisp of metal at the tip of the spear was full of killing intent. When Han Fei first saw the tip, he felt that it was bright and seemed to be able to see through the picture. Now, it seemed that it was a manifestation of extreme sharpness. He retracted his consciousness. Han Fei glanced at Forge the Universe. He didn't have many soul crystals now. After all, soul crystals were no longer of much use to him. At this moment, he no longer needed to rely on soul crystals to cultivate his mental strength. Of course, if it was an extremely powerful soul crystal, it should also be useful. However, he had yet to encounter one. Whether it was Yu Wendao or Gui Sanqing's Sun Moon Shell, there was no such thing. It could be seen that the improvement of one's divine soul would be more difficult the further one progressed. Just now, Han Fei visualized the god-scaring painting, not to continue to improve his soul power, but to recover his soul. Of course, he could also absorb and refine the souls of the people he had sucked dry in the Thousand Mountains ancient realm. 3 hours later, Han Fei took a long breath and slowly opened his eyes, looking helpless. More than 1,000 ownerless souls. In total, his soul power had increased by 2,000 points, and his perception range had increased by less than 1/10. The old turtle said, "Actually, I've already told you this before. If you really want to cultivate your soul, then keep swallowing the vitality of others. The speed of your improvement will amaze you." Han Fei curled his lips. "I'm already amazed at my own improvement speed. I don't need you to teach me." Han Fei thought to himself, "Don't be assimilated by the old turtle's ideas." In the old turtle's world, robbing people was a matter of course, regardless of reason or race. But Han Fei couldn't. If it weren't for the fact that he had many secrets, was talented, lucky, and tough means, he wouldn't have been able to do it. Han Fei felt that the old turtle wouldn't care about him at all. "Don't disturb me. I'll make a small breakthrough by the way." A large amount of spiritual energy flowed out, and thousands of points of spiritual energy surrounded Han Fei. "Who?" Using the swallowing technique, spiritual energy poured in and cleansed his body. After about half an hour, he heard a click and Han Fei made a breakthrough. He opened his eyes and looked at the information. Owner Han Fei level greater than 71, Junior Explorer, Spiritual Energy 130,000/130,000 Spiritual Power 12348/22066 Perception Range greater than 1,912 kilometers Law Enforcer Invincible Power greater than 216 waves First Spiritual Heritage Unknown Second Spiritual Heritage, Unawakened First Spiritual Beast, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish, Level 61 Second Spiritual Beast, Unawakened Main Art Sky Stealing Technique, Level 6 Avoid Fishing, Venerable Level, Divine Quality. Looking at his data, Han Fei was quite pleased. This was his growth during this period of time. After 4 years of suppression, his strength had tripled in just a few days in the Waterwood Heaven. Although the old tortoise always gave him advice, in fact, Han Fei knew very well that his own growth speed was not slow at all. It could even be said that this speed was extremely fast. Now in the Yin-Yang Heaven, there shouldn't be anyone who could cultivate faster than him. The Yin-Yang Heaven was like this, and so was the Waterwood Heaven. Even if it was a bug clan, the Bug Queen could at most reach the level of a law enforcer, right? It was impossible for a Bug Queen to directly become an explorer. In fact, many Bug Queens wouldn't directly cultivate a law enforcer, because the law enforcer ability was given by the Bug Queen, which undoubtedly limited the Bug Queen's development potential. But if the Bug Clan fought all the way up, their law enforcers would have all kinds of strange abilities. This was conducive to the reasonable development of the Bug Clan. Only in this way would this race become more and more abnormal. When Han Fei got up, there were no more creatures here. After all, even if it was a Tao-seeking state, the death of the 3 light-blazing cold lobster and the virtual white octopus was enough to warn those creatures that hadn't appeared yet. Little Fatty seemed to be in the midst of a breakthrough. With a thought, Han Fei threw tens of thousands of kilograms of spirit awakening fluid to it. When it swallowed about 20,000 kilograms of spirit awakening fluid, Little Fatty had already completed the breakthrough. However, this was only a breakthrough in the sea demon realm, so it wasn't difficult. When Han Fei was in this realm, he broke through 5 or 6 levels in a row with the help of spirit awakening fluid. Therefore, Han Fei planned to use the same trick again. Of course, he didn't feed it the spirit awakening fluid immediately. He had to wait for Little Fatty to stabilize first. However, this didn't prevent Han Fei from reading the information of Little Fatty. In his eyes, information emerged. Name 9 Death Soul Splitting Octopus Introduction An ancient mutant with a weak divine beast bloodline. The suckers have the ability to absorb spiritual energy, and essence blood. The 9 Death Soul Splitting Octopus has extremely strong spiritual power and can ignore the spiritual attacks of all creatures within 10 levels of itself. It has infinite strength, can offset 90% of the attacks, and has a super strong self-healing ability. Level 50 quality, legendary, can grow, contains spiritual energy 20868 food carnivorous, prefers shrimps and crabs, combat skills, limb rebirth, blood drop rebirth, soul-splitting tentacles, remarks blood drop rebirth, shared by the host and the 9 death soul-splitting octopus. Can only be used 9 times in a lifetime, and there are 7 times left. For Han Fei, Little Fatty only made a breakthrough in one realm. However, for Little Fatty itself, this realm had been stuck for a long time. What made Han Fei's eyes light up was that there was an additional combat skill called soul-splitting tentacles. The name didn't sound simple at all. However, he didn't have a test subject with him, so he didn't study it for the time being. Perhaps it was because it realized that it was too weak. With the remains of the octopus here, it had exhausted itself for a long time and only managed to absorb a little bit of blood essence. Little Fatty said, "Give this body to me. I need to make a breakthrough quickly." Han Fei was briefly stunned. "I only have less than 100,000 kilograms of spirit awakening fluid left." Little Fatty nodded. "Plus this body, it should be enough for me for a while." It seemed to have made a breakthrough. Little Fatty's head was much clearer, and it knew that it had accumulated enough resources. What it urgently needed now was a higher level. Han Fei immediately stored Little Fatty and the illusory by Zhang into Forge the Universe. The Spirit Awakening Fluid and the Spiritual Spring were both in Forge the Universe. The old turtle said, "You can't raise contractual spiritual beasts like this. They need to fight and kill." Every living being had to walk out of the path of slaughter, step by step. Even if it's a 9-death soul-splitting octopus. Han Fei curled his lips. "But if I'm killed, I can still be resurrected." The old turtle sneered. "Then you should let it roam the world by itself. If you are separated from it, if something happens to you, no one can find it. Then you can be resurrected, right?" Han Fei was stunned for a while. "No. Wait a minute. I'm not an educated person. Don't lie to me. Doesn't the resurrection ability of the 9-death soul-splitting octopus need to be with its host?" "Humph," the old turtle said helplessly. "Who told you this?" "That's the 9-death soul-splitting octopus. A fully grown 9-death soul-splitting octopus must be an exotic species. Even if you are thousands of kilometers away, it can still resurrect you." Han Fei said in disbelief, "Old Yuan, are you sure you're talking about the 9-death soul-splitting octopus in the sea demon realm?" This time, the old turtle was silent for a long time. "I don't know. Han Fei rolled his eyes. "What's the difference between you and me?" Although Han Fei felt that Little Fatty was very powerful, it shouldn't be so powerful. It was only level 50 in the sea demon realm. If it could be resurrected from a long distance, even a venerable wouldn't be able to do it. However, he didn't intend to take Little Fatty with him in the first place. Therefore, as long as the opportunity was right, he would throw it out to practice. Above the Ice God Gorge, he still couldn't perceive what was happening below. In the words of the old turtle, this was a place that could breed the blue sea ice sand. Because of the extreme een and extreme cold, it was still not a place that any creature could come in. For example, when Little Fatty just appeared, it was almost frozen to death. Fortunately, Han Fei lit a spiritual fire to warm its body. Otherwise, it would have frozen to death. When Han Fei returned to the white mist, he couldn't help but ask, "Old Yuan, I made a lot of noise down there. What's going on up there?" Chapter 1264. Faced with Han Fei's question, the old turtle couldn't help but say, "What can happen? It's nothing more than a venerable scanning with his perception. Even if you take this opportunity, what can they do?" Han Fei followed the old turtle's words and said, "They will tell the king, and the king will notice me. If the king notices me, then I will be in danger. God knows if the king will see through me." The old turtle said, "Even I can't see through you. You are now a sea demon, a genuine sea demon. The only problem is your real strength. If you are really discovered, you just need to create the illusion that you are transcending a tribulation and increase your strength to the primary Tao-seeking state, and the problem will be mostly solved. Han Fei was speechless. I have already transcended the tribulation. How can I trigger the lightning? The old turtle said, That's none of my business. However, in this vast sea, there will always be someone who can transcend a tribulation. What do you think? Han Fei's eyes lit up and he exclaimed, Sure enough, the older, the wiser. As long as I control the creature transcending the tribulation and let it transcend the tribulation, I can deprive it of its tribulation. In this way, I can create the illusion that it is transcending the tribulation. The old turtle said, I didn't teach you that. Han Fei said, That's what you think. However, it doesn't matter. This is a good method. If it doesn't work, I still have one last way. The Fish Dragon King is still in my hands. If it is really in a hurry, I can steal its opportunity to transcend the tribulation. It can't be more convenient. In Forge the Universe, the Fish Dragon King looked at little Fatty, who was holding a big octopus and absorbing its essence and blood. For some reason, it had a bad feeling. The Fish Dragon King lay on the ground in frustration, thinking, The rest of my life is over. Han Fei readjusted his state. Everything seemed to have calmed down. In fact, he even practiced the close-distance technique for an entire day in the white fog. He found some creatures to fight for a long time, as if the people above the Ice God Gorge didn't know about it. Although this move was a bumpkin, those venerables were prejudiced and thought, Even we can't get it. How can you get it? A day later, Han Fei came out of the mist, looking full of energy and strength. At this moment, Gui Sanqing, who had been possessed by the old turtle, suddenly opened his eyes and followed Han Fei. Han Fei transformed back into the Fish Dragon King and entered the Ice God Gorge. Immediately, a venerable summoned him. Different from the Thousand-Star City. In the Thousand-Star City, not everyone could see a venerable casually. Venerables were usually used as trump cards and were the pillars of a large clan. In the Shuemu heaven, there were many supremacies on the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. The number of supremacies in the two royal cities could not be less than that of the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. This meant that the number of venerables was at least more than 200. The one who had summoned Han Fei was the Seahorse Venerable. After Han Fei entered his palace, he slowly raised his eyes. You seem to have improved a lot. This time, his position on the prodigy roll should be secured. Within a short period of time, no one will be able to shake it. It all depends on when you undergo tribulation. Han Fei responded respectfully, This time, I may be able to reach a higher position. The Seahorse Highness opened his eyes slightly, but he did not pay much attention to it. How did the Ichthyosaur King grow? It had little to do with him. Since the Fish Dragon King chose the Ice God Gorge for this trial, it could be regarded as a friend of the Ice God Gorge in some ways. Besides, these venerables did not stay in the Ice God Gorge all the time. They would return to the royal city and other battlefields. However, the strong also had their own selfish motive. The Fish Dragon King could not possibly have too much of a relationship with them. However, Yu Kailing and Lan Shuer had survived the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm and were once the Fish Dragon King's subordinate. Their talents were obviously not weak. Although they were not comparable to the Fish Dragon King, if he could train them, he had plenty of ways to subdue them. He said, Dragon King, the Ice God Gorge also did its best to support you this time. You know that the royal city has always been strict in recruiting people. Yu Kailing and Lan Shuer may not be able to become venerables, but as long as they don't die, they will definitely become half-venerables. If they want to go to the royal city, it's best to have someone in the city, except for the suggestion of a venerable. Otherwise, they won't even know how they died. Since you have karma, you don't have to worry about this matter. Han Fei sneered in his heart. How can a venerable be so kind? Why would he want to chat with me? Sure enough, they all have their own purposes. If they want to train talents, they need someone to support them. After all, when a venerable is outside, they can't interfere with the affairs of the royal city. Besides, how many sea clans in the royal city don't have any trump cards? It's said that the royal city is difficult to go to, so it must be really difficult. Even a venerable has to go through the back door, which shows how difficult it is to go to the royal city. However, this was just a small favor. There is no need for me to provoke a venerable now. If this venerable hates me and sees something wrong with me, it will be bad. So, Han Fei looked indifferent, as if he didn't take it seriously at all. It's just a piece of cake. This time, after returning to the royal city, just let them go to the royal city. The seahorse venerable smiled slightly. They are your subordinates. Why don't you let them continue to guard you and take care of you? Han Fei thought to himself, how can I take care of them? Han Fei shook his head slightly. No, this trip to the 1,000-mountain ancient realm made me realize that there are many strong masters. The woman from the Shuemu heaven and the blood demon who ambushed me in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City are all very strong. I still lack experience. I plan to go all the way back to the royal city. The seahorse venerable was slightly surprised. Are you going to swim back in person? Han Fei said. With Gui Sanqing following me, there shouldn't be any big problems. The seahorse venerable thought for a moment. That's true. There are also powerful creatures in the outer sea, but the real powerful creatures are not here. With Gui Sanqing's protection, it shouldn't be a big problem to return to the royal city. However, Yu Keiling and Lan Shuer couldn't follow him. Whether it was dangerous or not depended on the person. For Han Fei, it was indeed not dangerous, but for these two people, it might be very dangerous. So, the seahorse venerable nodded slightly. That's good. When you return to the royal city, I will arrange for someone to send them to you. After the trip to the 1,000-mountain ancient realm, Yu Keiling and Lan Shuer both came out alive, and the two became good sisters. At this moment, in Yu Keiling's cave residence, Lan Shuer said, Sister Keiling, are we really going to go with the Fish Dragon King? This person is very ruthless, and will he really be our support? Yu Keiling's eyes were firm. Shuer, we have to rely on ourselves. When we reach the royal city, we need to find a way to show our talents in any aspect. If the Fish Dragon King is really not good enough, we have to find a way to find another master. Anyway, as long as we survive and become stronger, the situation will change one day. However, Yu Keiling was still a little worried and asked in a low voice, Shuer, is the Fish Dragon King wretched? Lan Shuer gritted her teeth. Just like him, he's quite domineering. Yu Keiling. Just when the two girls were worrying, a venerable suddenly said to them, Okay, you two don't need to follow the Fish Dragon King right now. This guy is going to swim back to the White Shell Royal City from the Ice God Gorge to gain experience. It's a good thing for you. Otherwise, you will probably die. When he returns to the Royal City, I will arrange for you to go with him. Both of them were shocked and quickly said, Thank you, my lord. A moment later, they looked at each other and were both relieved. They didn't have to go with Han Fei. At least they didn't have to worry about Han Fei making inappropriate demands. Although they still couldn't control themselves in the royal city, they could avoid him for as long as possible. Lan Shuer was relieved. Fortunately, by the time he returns from his journey, he'll probably have forgotten about us long ago. His situation in the royal city isn't good either. He won't have time to care about us then. Yu Keiling slightly nodded. I'm just a little surprised. This guy is indeed arrogant. He wants to swim back to the royal city? Lan Shuer said with a smile, That's not a big deal. No matter how weak this guy is, he is still an expert who ranks 10th on the heavenly talent roll. Besides, he should have made some progress this time. However, I'm a little surprised. He seems to be more domineering and aggressive than before he entered the 1,000-mountain ancient realm. Yu Keiling tilted her head and said, You think so too? I think so too. Especially when he came out of the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm. He was too aggressive. He was much more aggressive than when he went in, as if he were a different person. Han Fei didn't know that two women were studying him at this moment. Mainly, he felt that the Fish Dragon King had too little contact with Yu Kaling and Lan Shuer. In just a day's time, they had basically no contact with each other. When Han Fei was about to leave the Ice God Gorge, he suddenly met the half-mermaid Venerable at the gate. At this moment, the Venerable was looking into the distance, and Han Fei didn't know what it was looking at. Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. Is it waiting for me? Why? The half-mermaid Venerable looked back at Han Fei. Dragon King, have you seen Yu Wendao since you came out? Han Fei frowned slightly and even said in confusion, I haven't seen Mr. Wendao since I came out. Hasn't Mr. Wendao been waiting outside the Thousand Mountain Ancient Realm? The half-mermaid Venerable shook its head slightly. He went out to cultivate halfway. I thought he would return before you left. I didn't expect that he wouldn't come back yet. Han Fei said respectfully, I'm going back to the royal city. When Mr. Wendao returns, you can find me on the way. Han Fei thought to himself, Fish Wendao? You won't be able to see Fish Wendao for the rest of your life. The half-mermaid Venerable nodded slightly. Okay. That's good. Go. The third chapter. I'm busy with chores. The main plot will come soon. 1 or 2 days, end of this chapter. Chapter 1265. Thanks to the identity of the Fish Dragon King, Han Fei was not stopped when he came and went. Besides, with Gue Sanqing following him, no one would think there would be any problem. Unless Heavenly Venerable Water would sneak over, the Fish Dragon King's safety wouldn't be a big problem, so no one would be particularly concerned about him. After all, it didn't make sense for everyone to be vigilant at all times. Even their own family members needed to be on guard. This time, Han Fei finally didn't return to the Fire Spring. The direction of the royal city was to the east of the Dark War Port. In the north, Han Fei took a slight detour, but the whole distance was no more than 5 million kilometers. At a moderate speed, it took Han Fei a full day to come 200,000 kilometers away from the Ice God Gorge. This was mainly to prevent someone from secretly observing him, so he walked very slowly. From time to time, when he walked, he would occasionally fight a few battles. 1 day later, Han Fei exclaimed, Phew! I'm finally out of the range of those venerables. Ha ha, old Yuan, this is our world now. While talking, Han Fei issued an order in his mind, and Little Black, Little White, and Little Fatty appeared in the water. At this moment, Little Fatty had improved by 1 level compared to 2 days ago, which should be the effect of swallowing the Spirit Awakening fluid. Not surprisingly, the little bit of Spirit Awakening fluid left, plus the blood of the virtual white octopus, could at least improve Little Fatty by 1 level. Han Fei said, Little Fatty, I'll give you a month to travel 1,000,000 kilometers to the west. If anything happens, you have to rely on yourself. Little Fatty glanced at Han Fei with its 2 big eyes, pushed its tentacles, and rushed to the bottom of the sea. Little Black and Little White had already surrounded Han Fei. Little Black was still as lively as before, and he directly drilled to the bottom of the sea. In less than 2 minutes, Han Fei saw him bite a crab to pieces on the bottom of the sea. As for Little White, when it approached him, Han Fei felt a little cold. It seemed that Little White had changed a lot after swallowing the blue sea ice sand. Han Fei couldn't help touching Little White's cold head and said, Good girl, your daddy is also going to cultivate now. You and Little Black grow up quickly. Along the way, the great responsibility of finding treasures will be handed over to you. Little White kissed Han Fei's cheek affectionately, and then with a swish, it jumped out and swam to the bottom of the sea. That was because Whitey was no longer the Whitey from before. It was not something that just anyone could approach. Han Fei saw a blood eel try to rush at Little White, but when it was within 100 meters of Little White, its body suddenly stiffened and then quickly froze. Whitey opened its mouth, and a ball of blue divine soul was forcefully swallowed by Whitey. Seeing this scene, Han Fei couldn't help but sigh. Is the effect of natural spiritual treasures so great? Whitey, who had never fought before, might not be fighting now, but its strength was already terrifying. Little White and Little Black, as long as one of them didn't die, they wouldn't die. Therefore, Han Fei was quite relieved now. After all, according to Elder Yuan, spiritual beasts and contractual spiritual beasts all needed to be trained. If you keep them in a greenhouse and feed them from time to time, it is equivalent to killing their potential in disguise. The old turtle next to Han Fei said, "Woo! Only 1,000,000 kilometers in a month?" Han Fei grinned and said, "So what? I originally planned to go back to the capital while training. They should be notified to go back. During this period, we should take advantage of it to improve our strength." To be honest, Han Fei was indeed a little poor now. Although he still had 800 or 900 million points of spiritual energy, he couldn't use it much. He could also take advantage of this period to plunder the secret realms along the way. The old turtle said, "That's good. I am dredging the hidden diseases of this body and the impurities in the demonic veins. This process will take about 2 or 3 months. At that time, I will create a heavenly talent body." Han Fei grinned. "You've decided on this turtle? It's already so old." The old turtle said disdainfully, "Turtles have a long lifespan. However, 2 months later, you need to give me another apocalyptic divine technique. This time, I don't need much, just 50 years. Han Fei curled his lips. "Why do you need it again?" The old turtle said, "After all, this body is too weak, and there are still many hidden dangers that you didn't cure last time. Besides, my strength has been improved again. As long as you give me a little time, there are few semi-venerables who can rival me, which will be good for you." Han Fei waved his hand and said, "Then let's talk about it in 2 months. 1 month later. In the boundless sea, in an undersea jungle, under a decayed old tree, a large number of roots stretched out of the soil, and a tree man drilled out. At the moment the tree man came out, holes were drilled in the void, and Earth 9, Water Luster, Punishing Knife, and the Fire Seed appeared one after another. In the end, Han Fei slowly crawled out of the hole, looking calm. This place must have been looted 100 years ago. There are only 20,000 caddies of spiritual spring, and everything else has decayed. Forget it, let's go to the next place." The Fire Seed slightly complained, "Master, summon me to a place with fire. I'm really not used to this environment." Han Fei was speechless. "This is the sea. Where can I find a place with fire except for undersea volcanoes?" Water Luster sneered. "You can only blame yourself for giving birth to the wrong species." The Fire Seed said angrily, "If I swallow a volcano, it will take you 100 years of cultivation." Water Luster and the others all fled, too lazy to listen to it. They thought to themselves, since when did the Fire Seed start to brag? Han Fei scanned with his senses, only to find that the old turtle was cultivating on a reef 1,000 kilometers away. As for Little Fatty, it was fighting a big shell. It was a yellow shell with a body length of almost 18 meters, but different from regular shells. This shell was full of yellow tentacles around its opening. Han Fei had seen this kind of shell before. It was called coarse hair shell. Of course, it was called Jubei here. In the past month, Han Fei had seen Little Fatty and Jubei fight more than once. Out of instinct, octopuses might prefer clams, so they had a special fondness for shells. This coarse hair shell was a shell that Little Fatty could attack now, but it was a challenge. A large number of blooming yellow tentacles, like floating seaweed, were dancing like long whips, grabbing at Little Fatty. Little Fatty seemed to know what the shell was going to do. The suckers on its 8 tentacles were suddenly activated, and the terrifying suction force directly straightened the tentacles of the Jubei. Little Fatty's remaining tentacle suddenly hooked, and this guy directly pulled out a mass of soul. Then, the suckers on Little Fatty's 9 tentacles vibrated and directly sucked the soul. Chilla! The soul was torn apart and a Jew-Bay was killed by Little Fatty. After swallowing the soul, Little Fatty pulled open the Jew-Bay's shell with its suckers and sucked the flesh dry. Han Fei couldn't help but shake his head. Damn it, this guy is almost a foodie. Go fight. Go challenge. How can you improve quickly if you don't fight? Although Han Fei asked Little Fatty to go out on an adventure alone, in fact, Han Fei had been following it. After all, this was his first time, and Han Fei wasn't completely sure yet. Just when Han Fei was about to go over and teach Little Fatty a lesson, the old turtle suddenly shouted, "Come back, someone is coming." Han Fei's heart did a flip. Come back. Hearing this, the punishing saber and the others quickly rushed back. Fortunately, they hadn't gone far. Otherwise, if they couldn't come back in a short time, they would be doomed. Swish, swish, swish. The illusions of mountains and rivers were put away. Little Black and Little White disappeared into the center of his eyebrows, Little Fatty got back into his body, and the old turtle stood behind Han Fei. Han Fei grabbed the Sun Moon shell, pretending to perceive something. After about 5 minutes, Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Where is he?" The old turtle said, "I saw it from the heavenly secrets. If he is weak, I can't see it. But if he is strong, I can perceive it in advance." After another 5 minutes, with a swish, a void crack was opened on the bottom of the sea. In an instant, a half-mermaid Venerable appeared in front of Han Fei. Han Fei hurriedly recalled who this person was. The old turtle's voice sounded in Han Fei's heart, Changshui Qin, Venerable, responsible for the secret realm assessment of the Baibei royal city. Han Fei hurriedly said, "Greetings, Venerable Changshui. Are you looking for me?" Changshui Qin said coldly, "Of course. The Ice God Gorge said that you were going to swim back to the royal city. It's been a month. You should have arrived. Since you haven't arrived yet, I'm here to take a look." Han Fei immediately said, "Venerable Changshui, I'm training." Changshui Qin frowned slightly, looked at the traces of the secret realm not far away, and couldn't help but say, "Do you think the secret realms in the royal city are not enough for you? Or do you think the secret realms in the outer sea are stronger than those collected in the royal city?" Han Fei noticed that this venerable seemed to think that he was too slow. Besides, from his words, he could tell that this Changshui Qin didn't think highly of the secret realms in the outer sea at all. Han Fei immediately said, "The Dragon King didn't think so. It's just that on this trip to the front line, I met the two greatest enemies of my life. The Dragon King just wants to see how many creatures, fated chances, and treacherous dangers there are in the outer seas." Changshui Qin was slightly surprised. "Fish Dragon King, you seem to be talking too much." Han Fei's heart skipped a beat, and the old turtle also reminded him, "The Fish Dragon King has always been simple. There's no need for logic." Han Fei suddenly raised his head. "Venerable, to tell you the truth, I feel that the Dragon King's bloodline is changing, and my strength is increasing rapidly. When I go back, I want to enter the top 5, so I stalled for some time outside." "Top 5? Changshui Qin was a little suspicious. "Are you bragging?" However, after hearing Han Fei's words, Changshui Qin seemed to understand something. Yes, the Fish Dragon King's 10th place had always been unstable. He heard from the Ice God Gorge that the Fish Dragon King had some opportunities. He hasn't returned yet because he is digesting the opportunities? And this opportunity actually gives this kid the confidence to enter the top 5? It seems that this opportunity is not small. No wonder this kid hasn't returned yet. Changshui Qin couldn't help but ask, "How long?" "Give me a time. I will arrange a secret realm assessment for you according to the time you have wasted. The longer you delay, the more difficult the secret realm assessment will be. You have to think about it carefully." Han Fei took a deep breath. 3 months. Changshui Qin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You sure are arrogant. Okay, I will wait for you in the royal city." With that, Changshui Qin tore the void and stepped into the air. From beginning to end, He didn't even look at Gue Sanqing, who was played by the old turtle. First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1266. After Chang Shui-Qin left, the old turtle immediately cursed. Although you didn't learn the mind-manipulating technique, didn't you read the Fish Dragon King's divine soul? Han Fei smiled bitterly. I did. But isn't it only something important that can be read? The old turtle said, your soul-sucking technique is not good enough. A true soul catcher would be able to read all the information you wanted, as if you were repeating someone else's memory. This empress had always thought that you were unwilling to accept the soul search because you were confident in your soul search ability. In the end, you couldn't have been guarding against this empress, right? Han Fei pretended not to hear it and asked in a daze, complete reading? The kind that can read every detail of his life? Suddenly, Han Fei secretly took a breath. He seemed to have neglected something. Was the mind manipulating really that powerful? He could even see every single detail in the other party's memories? In the past, the void lines could read some memories, so Han Fei thought that this was the soul catcher. After all, these were all methods of reading other people's memories, not experiencing their entire lives. At this moment, Han Fei couldn't help but ask, is the soul manipulating technique really so powerful? The old turtle was speechless. I'll impart it to you first and imprint it into your mind. See for yourself. It's up to you whether you want to learn it or not, but don't be like what happened this time. Even recognizing a person took a lot of effort, and you even needed this emperor to remind you. After a while, a new technique emerged in Han Fei's mind. Mind manipulating, venerable level, low quality, introduction. This is a forbidden technique that goes against the heavenly Tao. It forcefully steals the souls of others to observe. Deduction. Soul-searching spell deduction consumption. 1 billion drawback 1. If the soul catcher's strength is higher than the soul catcher's, it will easily backfire. Drawback 2. When using the mind-manipulating technique to read memories, it is easy to be impacted by the soul catcher's memory, affecting one's own soul memory. Drawback 3. Forcibly captivating the soul can easily cause the soul of the captive to become confused and become stupid. Seeing this technique, Han Fei slightly gasped. Is this against the law of nature? The old tortoise said disdainfully. What do you mean by going against the heavenly law? Cultivation is already going against the heavenly Tao, so why care about soul devouring? Han Fei didn't really care. However, the mind manipulating could be deduced. Since the soul-searching art was a level higher than the mind manipulating art, the side effects should be much smaller. However, Han Fei did not choose to deduce it. For him now, 1 billion points of aura was a huge number. Over the past month, he hadn't just been exploring secret realms and searching for treasures. Han Fei also needed to consume a lot of spiritual energy. He had even fed Little White 100 million points of spiritual energy, which he had saved for Little White. Moreover, who knew what would happen if they went to Royal City? Therefore, although he still had enough spiritual spring on him, it was not worth it to deduce it all at once. This is not. One day later, Han Fei appeared in Forge the Universe again. When the Fish Dragon King saw Han Fei, he gritted his teeth and said, "How long are you going to keep me here?" Han Fei smiled. "Don't worry. It won't be long. 3 years at most." The Fish Dragon King heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that it had been 3 years. He asked, "Then why are you here?" Han Fei smiled. "Nothing. I just want to borrow your memory." The Fish Dragon King. Before the Fish Dragon King could react, Han Fei had already pressed his hand on the Fish Dragon King's head. Poor Fish Dragon King, its strength was basically abolished, and this world was imprisoned. The space it was in was divided independently by Han Fei. There wasn't even the slightest bit of spiritual energy, let alone recovery. The Fish Dragon King, who had lost its strength, became a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered by Han Fei. Han Fei wanted to practice the soul manipulating technique on the Fish Dragon King because the Fish Dragon King's realm was not as high as his, its strength was not as strong as his, and its soul was also weaker than his. If even with such an advantage there would be side effects, then whether he would need to use this soul manipulating technique in the future would become a problem. With his personality, he probably wouldn't choose to use it. He only felt that his consciousness was immersed in a sea of memories. It was as if there was a void in all directions and there were all kinds of images, all kinds of vivid content. Han Fei knew that he was just a spectator. As he scanned with his consciousness, a large number of memories flashed through his consciousness. He saw the true body of the Fish Dragon King, which turned out to be a sea snake. However, this sea snake had a background. It had 4 limbs, hind limbs, 4 feet, and 2 horns on its head. However, this was not a dragon, but a snake-like creature. Han Fei directly ignored the memories of the Fish Dragon King before it was awakened. He found that memories could be skipped. In an instant, Han Fei skipped to the time when the Fish Dragon King was taken into the royal city. Someone he knew, a heavenly talent of the same realm, the Fish Dragon King was bullied. That was the strength that he gained step by step and experienced many life and death situations. All kinds of information popped up in his head almost at the same time. After getting the known information, Han Fei's consciousness returned to his body. Who? Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes and let out a long breath. Before Han Fei could do anything, he saw the Fish Dragon King's eyes began to roll back, foam at the mouth, and convulse all over. Han Fei was speechless. Wait, what's going on? He's a heavenly talent after all. Why is he like this? The old turtle's voice sounded. Maybe he's been disabled for a while. He's in a bad state now, so he's like this. Han Fei immediately said, No, this guy can't die or go crazy. I have to save him. With that, Han Fei threw a holy light technique over, and the Fish Dragon King stopped convulsing. Its complexion was getting better at a speed visible to the naked eye. Han Fei now surpassed the Fish Dragon King in both realm and strength. With a holy light technique, even the vitality of the 9-headed snake grass could recover crazily, let alone the Fish Dragon King. About 10 minutes later, the Fish Dragon King came back to its senses. About 10 minutes later, the Fish Dragon King felt that its internal injuries had recovered by a small half. When the soft healing light disappeared, the Fish Dragon King felt that its strength had recovered by at least 20%. The Fish Dragon King was surprised. What did you do to me just now? Han Fei frowned and said, Before I agree to let you go, I won't allow you to have any strength. With that, Han Fei raised his knife and pierced the Fish Dragon King's dantian again. Ew! The Fish Dragon King vomited a mouthful of blood and said in a trembling voice, Since you don't allow me to have strength, why did you heal me? Han Fei was silent for a while. I overdid it. The Fish Dragon King. Coming out of Forge the Universe, Han Fei took a deep breath. It seems that I missed a lot of information. Old Turtle, how long did it take me to search your soul just now? The old turtle said, 3 minutes. Han Fei couldn't help but be stunned. Just 3 minutes? The old turtle said, Of course, that's your consciousness observing. Maybe you think a long time has passed, but in fact, it's only 3 minutes. It's like a dream. You think you've had a long dream, but in fact, it hasn't been long. Han Fei thought about it and nodded. In the reincarnation, he had spent decades. Wasn't it only a few dozen days? However, it seemed to be quite worthwhile to cultivate in such a dreamland. Han Fei couldn't help but say, I said I'll go back in 3 months. Isn't that a bit too long? After reading the Fish Dragon King's memory, Han Fei finally knew the distribution of the capital. First of all, the permanent population of the capital had never exceeded 100,000 people. Among them, 70% of the residents were only level 6. Therefore, every expert with a demonic heritage above the 7th level would have at least 1 or 2 followers. and there were also standards to survive in the capital. First of all, the 70% were experts with level 6 demonic heritage, which was about 70,000 people. If these people didn't follow someone, it was fine. Unless their followers asked them in person, they had to go on an adventure every other month. And this adventure had a probability of death. Almost every adventure, nearly 1% of the people would die. This was not a simple number. It was a level 6 demonic heritage. No matter where he was, he could be called a heavenly prodigy. But in the capital, they had to work hard to ensure that they didn't die. This meant that every month, about 700 sea demons would die. In 1 year, more than 8,000 people died. This number could be described as terrifying. They were all powerhouses in the sea spirit realm. It wasn't a boast, but the people who were eliminated by Royal City every year would be a terrifying force to be reckoned with if they were thrown out into battle. However, it was also because of this high elimination rate that every level 6 heavenly talent who entered the capital worked hard to grow. Therefore, there were many Tao seekers in the capital. All the Tao-seeking realm powerhouses added up took up about 25% of the total number of people. The remaining 5% included venerables, mermaids, sea beasts, and other creatures. And among the 25%, 15% were ordinary heavenly talents with level 6 demonic heritage. Those with level 7 demonic heritage or above were only 10%. But even if it was only 10%, there were still 10,000 people. What a frightening number it was! Han Fei clicked his tongue. Back then, Tang Ji's level 7 spiritual heritage was enough to make the Heavenly Sword sect come to welcome him in person, and he had already become one of the few powerhouses of his generation in the Thousand-Star City. And among the people he had met so far, few had a spiritual heritage above level 7. Of course, spiritual heritage with growth potential didn't count. Those were heavenly talents that the Thug Academy had tried every means to dig out, so they couldn't be measured by common sense. And this was only the number of people in the capital. Like those ordinary heavenly talents, even the Fish Dragon King and the others had to participate in secret realm trials regularly. But different from ordinary people, these heavenly talents with level 7 demonic heritage or above had preferential treatment. In some secret realms, there would be special personnel to rescue them, which greatly reduced the probability of death. However, reducing the probability of death and not dying were two different things. Some people were unlucky and couldn't be rescued in time, so they could only blame it on their bad luck. And the secret realms of the capital were divided into levels. According to the different degrees of difficulty, they were divided into 5 levels: easy, ordinary, hard, purgatory, and forbidden. If you were an ordinary heavenly talent, you could choose easy once a month. For a heavenly talent like the Fish Dragon King, you usually chose hard, and no one would start from ordinary. With the pride of the Fish Dragon King, it was even more impossible. However, if a heavenly talent with level 7 demonic heritage or above didn't participate in a trial for a month, the difficulty of the next trial would automatically increase by 1 level. Therefore, Han Fei had already spent a month. Now, he told Changshuiken that he would go back in 3 months. Didn't this mean that the difficulty of his trial had suddenly jumped to the level of a forbidden area? In Han Fei's mind, he also read some information about the level of a forbidden area. It seemed that heavenly talents with level 9 spiritual heritage or below had only a 10% chance of survival, which was really a narrow escape. Why was it below level 9 spiritual heritage? Because those with level 9 spiritual heritage or above rarely appeared in 1,000 years. If there was one, it would be a treasure. And who would throw such a treasure into the difficulty of a forbidden area? The old turtle said leisurely, "Just now, I thought you knew." Han Fei, second update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1267. Since it had already happened, Han Fei was the one who dug a pit for himself. However, Han Fei wasn't very panicked. What hadn't he seen before? Even if it was a forbidden secret realm with a slim chance of survival, so what? Anyway, he still had the old turtle with him. Even if the possessed Gui Sanshin couldn't get in, the soul of the old turtle was still in his sea of consciousness. After half a day, Han Fei called out Little Fatty and the punishing saber again. At this moment, Han Fei said to Little Fatty and the others solemnly, "You don't have much time left. At this time, improve your strength as much as you can. Consolidate your realm? Improve it first and then consolidate it." The tree spirit asked, "Master, will it be dangerous in 3 months?" Han Fei nodded slightly. Deep in the enemy's territory, anything can happen. As the saying goes, preparedness averts peril. We can't relax at all. Then Han Fei looked at Little Fatty and said, "You are the weakest one. You are only a peak-level junior sea demon. You have to work hard, okay?" Little Fatty's big eyes rolled. "If I have spirit awakening fluid, I can reach the intermediate peak level. If I go any higher, I can't make progress in 3 months." Han Fei certainly knew that more haste, less speed. When he used spirit awakening fluid to accelerate his breakthrough, his realm was also very unstable and his strength was very weak. It took him a lot of time to stabilize it. However, if he could become stronger first, why not? However, Han Fei was a little helpless. There was no spirit awakening fluid left. Suddenly, the tree spirit said, "If it's just spirit awakening fluid, there is still a little in the sea quelling painting." Han Fei couldn't help but be surprised. Right, how could I forget this? When he first entered the sea quelling painting, the tree spirit treated him with spirit awakening fluid. Now, Han Fei clearly knew that the so-called spirit awakening fluid was just a diluted embodiment of Tao. Or, it was born under the influence of Tao. And the sea quelling painting originally belonged to the immortal palace or the king. Therefore, it was not surprising that there was spirit awakening fluid in the sea quelling painting. Han Fei asked, "How much exactly?" The tree spirit said, "Not too much. After all, this thing is actually only effective for creatures below the sea spirit state. At least the sea spirit realm had their own path of law enforcement. Generally speaking, no spirit awakening fluid is needed. So, it's probably less than 5 million caddies." Han Fei. Han Fei was the only one who was surprised. Everyone else was extremely calm. For Tree Spirit and the others, the spirit awakening fluid was useless. They didn't even drink it as tea, so Tree Spirit was the only one drinking it. The old tortoise probably wouldn't even bother to pick it up if it fell to the ground. Han Fei and Little Fatty's eyes glittered when they heard that the tree spirit had 5 million kilograms of spirit awakening fluid. Although these two poor people had been rich more than once, when they saw the things that people didn't want, they still felt really good. He asked for 5 million spirit awakening fluid from the tree spirit and didn't bother to distribute it. Now, only Little Fatty needed spirit awakening fluid. Han Fei took out the sun moon shell, poured all the spirit awakening fluid into it, and stuffed it into Little Fatty's mouth. "Drink as much as you can. That's all I can give you." Anyway, it was free, so Han Fei didn't care. In fact, even if Little Fatty was now a peak-level sea demon, it wouldn't help him. After all, its level was still a bit too low. Han Fei clearly knew that the reason why those people had powerful spiritual beasts and contractual spiritual beasts was that they had lived too long. Whether it was himself or Little Fatty, they had too short a time to grow up. It was not easy to make up for this. The old tortoise said, "In this case, don't say that I didn't teach you. Although I don't know much about the 9 death soul splitting octopus, don't take all your trump cards to that forbidden place. There's still room for negotiation." Han Fei thought to himself, the old tortoise must be quite worried about this trip. Normally speaking, if a super-strong master who had been sealed for a long time was reincarnated, it would be a good way to survive. Who would be willing to go into danger? Han Fei said lightly, "Fortune comes from danger. Even I'm not afraid." "What are you afraid of? If this trip succeeds, your strength will be doubled." Won't it be a piece of cake for you? 3 months later. 1,000,000 kilometers away from the Sea Demon King City. In the past 3 months, strong masters had observed Han Fei 3 times. However, they were all reminded by the old tortoise, so they didn't expose the tree spirit and the others. Little Fatty didn't consume the spirit awakening fluid extravagantly either. It spent nearly 2 months in battles, mostly defeating stronger opponents. Until now, it had just stabilized itself as a level 54 creature. In 4 months, it had broken through 1 major realm and 4 minor realms. This was definitely not a slow speed. Although it couldn't completely polish its foundation, it was not unstable. The most dangerous time was when it challenged a dark moonwolf fish that had just entered the intermediate sea spirit realm. 3 of Little Fatty's tentacles were broken. In the end, he was actually forced to a draw by it. This was thanks to Little Fatty's own characteristics, which could ignore all mental attacks within 10 levels and offset 90% of the enemy's attack power. These 2 abilities, no matter which creature it was, would at least be a legendary creature, but Little Fatty had them all. It was equivalent to being immune to both magic and physical attack. How could it not be strong? And Han Fei, who had been practicing the demon god scripture all the way, was almost a Tao. There were thousands of Tao in this technique. The demon god scripture was divine, and all creatures were subdued. When Han Fei practiced this technique, he gradually discovered something. In terms of cultivation effect, this was equivalent to a technique that only cultivated realms, so it shouldn't be called an ungraded technique. However, as the demon god scripture was divine, how could it not have some techniques? The phrase, "all creatures are subdued," in the demon god scripture was the real value of this technique. This spell technique could be used to command living beings of the same or lower cultivation level as the caster. To be precise, it was not a command but a hypnosis. Han Fei had tried it. With his current ability, he could hypnotize about 10 experts at the same level as him, provided that the opponent's soul was not that strong. It was different from the void lines. Although the void lines had been replaced by the 3 veins of the 3 light blazing cold lobster, it was still controlled like a marionette. The demon god scripture was different. It was hypnosis. Those who were hypnotized could even exert their strongest combat power. Of course, although the effect was good, occasionally some creatures would break free from the hypnosis. This was inevitable. After all, the more creatures were hypnotized, there would always be a few exceptions. It could hypnotize nearly 100 sea spirit-level creatures, which was enough to show how terrifying this technique was. If he could hypnotize sea demons, he might be able to hypnotize hundreds of them. Even if their realms were lower, the number might be even more terrifying. Of course, the number of hypnotized creatures depended on Han Fei's experience during cultivation. In fact, could he hypnotize so many creatures? Han Fei didn't know. Although there were many sea creatures, not all of them were there for him to experiment on. Knowing that he didn't have time to continue cultivating, Han Fei took back Little Fatty and the others. At this time, Han Fei didn't cross the void. The main reason was that, thanks to the old turtle's reminder, Han Fei was now very wary of the strong, so he had to do some divination every now and then. Just half an hour ago, Han Fei calculated that the road ahead would be very dangerous. Why was it dangerous? Han Fei didn't know. However, this was already close to the royal city's sphere of influence. A distance of 1,000,000 kilometers was actually very far, and even the venerables couldn't see from such a distance. As for the king, even if they could see him, would they see him? Besides, his luck was here, and the old turtle was also with him. Logically speaking, the king couldn't see him from a distance. Seeing that Han Fei seemed to be vigilant, the old turtle couldn't help saying, "I didn't feel any threat from the strong." Han Fei thought, "I just have a hunch. It may be the danger from the sea, or I'm overthinking." For 6 hours in a row, Han Fei's speed was neither fast nor slow. At this speed, if there was no danger in the first half, he would directly tear the void and go to the royal city. Just when Han Fei was perceiving the surroundings and checking the situation, he suddenly sensed a fluctuation in a secret realm. A secret realm? Han Fei couldn't help frowning. Did the danger he sensed come from here? Because it was a secret realm, it didn't matter how far he could perceive. Naturally, the old turtle couldn't perceive it either. The old turtle said, "Do you want to explore it?" Han Fei was slightly puzzled. "If it can make me feel a little uneasy, this secret realm shouldn't be bad. Besides, even if there's danger, with the two of us joining hands, can't we explore a mystic realm?" The old turtle said, "In this secret realm, there may already be people. There were many auras left here. Someone must have explored it." Han Fei's eyes flickered. "That's right. But why did I have a problem with my calculation? It turned out that the real danger came from here. But what if someone was here? He and the old turtle, plus Yuandao, plus the punishing saber and the other four, could barely be regarded as 3.5 venerables? Thinking of this, Han Fei felt that if no venerable came out, who could compete with him? Immediately, Han Fei grinned. "That's great. If we fight outside, it's easy for others to spy on us. But in this secret realm, the right time, the right place, and the right people are all in my hands. It's simply a free resource." Han Fei stepped in and immediately appeared in an undercurrent at the bottom of the sea. Where exactly was it? He didn't know. But as soon as Han Fei came in, he knew that something was wrong. The old turtle also shouted, "Young master, there's an ambush." Third. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1268. In the blink of an eye, as soon as Gui Sanqing, who was possessed by the old turtle, appeared, an array appeared under his feet and teleported him away. Although the old turtle was strong enough, he had his limits. He had been waiting for them to take the bait. So what if he was strong? Besides, the old turtle was only half a venerable at the moment. He had been washing Gui Sanqing's body all the way and didn't seem to be cultivating at all. Before Han Fei had a chance to think, at the moment when Gui Sanqing was teleported away, a scorching knife mark crossed the back of Han Fei's neck. Almost at the same time as the knife mark appeared, a water-shaped sound wave visible to the naked eye and a soul-piercing attack appeared. Under the triple bombardment, there were spider silk entangling Han Fei's feet. Han Fei's reaction was not slow. The moment he appeared in this space, he immediately used distance reduction and activated the proximity technique. As if expecting Han Fei's move, in the direction where Han Fei fled, the void suddenly exploded and was full of cracks, full of murderous intent. This was the drawback of the space shrinking technique. Although he had the ability to shrink the space, he didn't avoid it. As a result, if a void crack appeared, they would cut Han Fei in a faster way. In the past, the Fish Dragon King's way to deal with it was to pay a price and forcibly interrupt its execution. But even so, it was not very safe. Han Fei made up his mind. He might as well beat the Fish Dragon King at its own game. Immediately, Han Fei pretended to be tricked, and the space shrinking technique stopped halfway. Han Fei grunted, blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and his body flew past several void cracks. Who would have thought that there would be a reversal? Someone was afraid that this couldn't hurt the Fish Dragon King, so he set up a string of red sand-like substances in this void crack. As soon as this thing came out, Han Fei felt that the heaven spirit detoxifying insect in his body moved. A large number of red poisonous things were hooked by the heaven spirit detoxifying insect and began to swallow them. Han Fei said to him via voice transmission, "Old Yuan, don't rush to take action. I'll put on a show. Let me see who is trying to trick me." Puff! Han Fei spat out a mouthful of blood and protected his body with demonic energy, as if he was struggling to break through the poisonous fog. Cough, cough. Han Fei staggered and shouted in a low voice, "Who is the one who plotted against me? Come out." "Ichthyosaur King, aren't you usually very arrogant? My younger brother died in the Thousand Mountains ancient realm. Why are you still alive? As soon as Han Fei heard the voice, a person popped up in his mind. Yu Guang, ranked 9th on the heavenly talent list. This Yu Guang was originally Yu Hong's older brother. Due to his proficiency in poison, he had managed to defeat the Fish Dragon King by a fluke. Therefore, he was ranked 9th. It was also because of that incident that many people felt that the Ichthyosaur King was about to die. The Ichthyosaur King was in an awkward position. Those who were deemed worthy of challenge were the weakest among the 10 prodigies. Moreover, the Fish Dragon King just so happened to separate Yu Guang and Yu Hong's rankings. Now that Yu Hong had perished, whether or not the Fish Dragon King was the culprit, Yu Guang would only place this hatred on the Fish Dragon King. Apart from Yu Guang, there was also a shark man who was as strong as a muscular man. This person was the one who specialized in spatial rift. Because his spatial rifts completely suppressed the Ichthyosaur King's close-distance technique, he was ranked 8th on the heavenly talent list. The shark man grinned and said, "Ichthyosaur King, I heard that your bloodline mutated after this trip. If you were still the old you, I wouldn't have bothered to attack you. But now, you can die now." Han Fei gnashed his teeth. "Yu Guang, Shark Maru, and a few pieces of trash want to kill me?" A woman in a black robe bellowed, "Ichthyosaur King, you call me trash? When we fought, we only had a 50-50 chance of winning. Who do you think you are?" A woman appeared in Han Fei's mind. She had evolved from a manta ray and was extremely cruel. Her bone spurs were extremely hard. Although her ranking was below 20, she was in the top 5 of the heavenly talent list in terms of defense. Han Fei gnashed his teeth and bellowed, "Gu Buyu, apart from your tough bones, what else can you do?" At this moment another person said, "He was heavily wounded, poisoned, and trapped by my soul threads. He will definitely die today. What else do you have to say?" Bam! At this moment, dozens of kilometers away, the old turtle was fighting 4 people alone. Yu Guang sneered. "Yu Ding is right. Ichthyosaur King, you're dead today. Even if we're discovered, so what? Will the Venerable One attack the 4 of us just because of you? However, your Dragon King bloodline is not bad. It's suitable for my new poison." Shark Maru chuckled. "Ichthyosaur King, I heard that you were in the limelight on this trip. I wonder what kind of people the Cloud Sea Forest Tree and the Blood Sea Divine Wood City sent there. However, it doesn't matter. As long as you hand over your resources obediently, I won't do anything." Han Fei glanced at them coldly and thought to himself, "Old Turtle, the 4 servants won't run away, will they?" The old turtle responded, "If they can't run away, do you want them to live?" Han Fei quickly realized what he meant. "Kill the 2 weakest ones and let the other 2 go. I'll only let Gu Buyu go and kill the rest." The old turtle said, "Huh? It seems that you've caused quite a stir this time." Han Fei sneered. "I'll take the resources that are delivered to my door. Besides, the current Ichthyosaur King is different from the previous one. I can show them." Then Han Fei gritted his teeth and roared, "You 4 shameless scoundrels, fight me fair and square if you dare." Shark Maru said disdainfully, "Ichthyosaur King, you're too conceited. You just have a Dragon King bloodline, right? In the world of cultivation, the strong prey on the weak. Fight me fair and square? Do you think this is the royal city?" Han Fei pretended to fluctuate his aura and suddenly burst out with demonic energy. He used distance reduction and chose to attack Yu Ding, who was using the soul-piercing technique. As if he had known that Han Fei would go on a rampage, Yu Ding immediately pulled him back with invisible threads behind him. At the same time, a large net swept across the sky and swept at Han Fei. Han Fei took a look, only to find that it was something like a soul lock. Chu Qinyan had used it on him before. However, it was absorbed by the demon purification pot. Han Fei was relieved. That's good. Since these people were all prepared, and he didn't want to kill them all, he might as well pretend more. Han Fei took a step back and thrust out his spear. Gubuyu, on the other hand, unfolded a pair of white bone wings and forcibly resisted Han Fei's blow. However, she was also sent flying thousands of meters away by the attack. After all, no matter how embarrassed the Ichthyosaur king was, this heavenly talent, whose ranking was much lower than hers, couldn't compare to her. If defense could explain everything, who could compare to Han Fei? Shark Maru raised his knife and grinned hideously. Ichthyosaur king, I finally don't have to see your arrogant face anymore. The knife light bloomed, and at the same time, the phantom of a shark full of sharp teeth appeared. This was Shark Maru's companion spirit, which was also a shark. Seeing that Han Fei's strength seemed to have been greatly reduced, Yu Guang was overjoyed and thrust his spear at Han Fei's heart. Bam! Han Fei swept his spear and blocked the knife light. However, he was still stabbed to the seabed by Yu Ding. Feeling the soul power being absorbed by the void lines, with a puff, Han Fei pretended to spit out a mouthful of blood again. While vomiting blood, Han Fei let the soul forbidden net cover him. Han Fei roared, "Gui Sanqing, run out and report what happened today to the venerables." Shark Maru and the others were slightly alarmed and shouted almost at the same time. He killed Gui Sanqing. He must die. Block the exit. Don't let him escape. Yu Guang sneered. Ichthyosaur king, you overestimate your followers. Gui Sanqing isn't weak, but how can we be worse than you? Today you too can't escape even if you have wings. As he spoke, Yu Ding had already come to Han Fei's side and sneered. No one can escape from the soul forbidden net. Ichthyosaur king, you have nowhere to run. Yu Guang, Shark Maru, and the others had already walked to the net, looking at Han Fei contemptuously. Shark Maru said, "Yu Guang, I'm taking my share." With that, Shark Maru walked to Han Fei step by step until he was less than 2 meters away from Han Fei. Then he slashed down with his long knife, intending to kill Han Fei directly. Clang! The next moment, something that dumbfounded everyone happened. The power of Shark Maru's knife fell on Han Fei's shoulder, but there was a faint smile on Han Fei's face, looking at them as if they were fools. Immediately, Shark Maru and the others' hearts tightened. What's going on? Almost subconsciously, the few of them wanted to retreat. However, in the next second, Han Fei had disappeared. Puff! With a tearing sound, Yu Ding, who was still immersed in the pleasure of killing the Ichthyosaur king, was torn in half. With another wave of his hand, the instant mystic spear pierced Yu Guang's chest. Shark Maru and Gubuyu were shocked. Wasn't the Ichthyosaur king tied up by the soul forbidden net? How could it still attack? Besides, they discovered a problem at the same time. The Ichthyosaur king had become stronger, much stronger. Was it because of the opportunity on the front line? Shark Maru shouted, "How is it possible?" Yu Guang was a little dumbfounded at the moment. When he heard the sound of puff, he had already been pierced. But at the critical moment, purple light erupted, black smoke spread, and a large number of poisonous things spurted out, trying to stop Han Fei. However, the void lines had already blocked him. Yu Guang only felt that his soul was shaken, and part of his soul was controlled. But he was also a super strong master on the heavenly talent list. Condensing his soul into a knife, he tried to cut off the soul power controlling him. Unfortunately, the gap between their realms and absolute strength was obvious. Since Han Fei had already attacked, how could he resist? Just when Yu Guang was about to call out to Shark Maru, Han Fei's spear that had already pierced Yu Guang's chest exploded with demonic energy, directly blowing Yu Guang up. All this happened in less than a second. 2 strong masters were sneak attacked and died in an instant. Seeing this scene, Gubuyu's heart sank. Covered with white bones, he quickly retreated, shouting, "Green Tongue, put down Gui Sanqing and save me." First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1269. As soon as they heard Gubuyu's cry for help, the people who were besieging Gui Sanqing all changed their expressions. 4 against 1? How could it be like this? Moreover, it was in a situation where the opponent was unprepared. There was no reason for him to lose. Although they were fighting on the side, they were also paying attention to this side. Han Fei had deceived everyone. At the moment when Yu Ding and Yu Guang died, the Dao-seeking state demons who followed them roared, "Young master!" The two Dao-seeking realm demons collided with an invisible barrier as soon as they took a step forward. The old turtle's voice was indifferent. "Don't you think it's too late to leave now?" Han Fei ignored Gubuyu. After piercing Yu Guang with his spear, he used distance reduction. As soon as he dodged, a red light chopped Yu Guang's body into pieces. Sha Maru took action, but he was still half a step too late. He knew very well that no one here could compete with the Fish Dragon King in terms of speed. If everyone could compete with the closed distance technique, how could the Fish Dragon King be ranked 10th on the Heavenly Talent list? Seeing that his attack failed, Sha Maru let go of his long knife, and then thousands of knife shadows formed a domain like a torrent of knife shadows. Sha Maru, as the 8th-ranked powerhouse, had a good reaction speed and timing. He knew very well that he couldn't escape from the Fish Dragon King, nor could he outrun it. Although he didn't know how the Fish Dragon King got rid of the Soul Forbidden Net, Yu Ding and Yu Guang died because they were too close to Han Fei. They were killed by a sneak attack. Sha Maru's ranking was higher than that of the Fish Dragon King. At this moment, he certainly wouldn't be scared just because Han Fei killed 2 people in a sneak attack. Instead, his face became fierce. These 2 people were dead, and Gubuyu ran away. Not only did the Fish Dragon King's resources belong to him, but also all its properties in the royal city. Seeing that his attack was easily dodged by Han Fei, Sha Maru couldn't help but smile. "Although it's beyond my expectation, you still have to die in my domain." No matter how strong Sha Maru was, Han Fei didn't have to be afraid of him. He didn't care about Gubuyu, who had already run away. This woman posed no threat to him at all, so he could let her go. Han Fei raised his eyes, only to discover that he was surrounded by enormous holes that looked like sharp teeth, like a mouth full of sawtooth shark teeth. It looked quite appalling. From the outside, Han Fei looked like he was in a weird big mouth full of sharp teeth. Ga. He could only see those sharp teeth closing, the razor-sharp teeth biting the seawater, leaving white marks. However, Han Fei sneered in his heart. Looking at the sharp teeth that were about to close, he raised his hand and clasped a huge tooth with one hand. Gotcha! The tooth blade was shattered, and Han Fei held the spear in a reverse grip, raised his hand, and performed the Monkey King 3,000 sticks, and thousands of stick shadows appeared. Bang bang bang! Crack, crack, crack! Shark Maru looked disdainful and expectant, but when he saw Han Fei break the tooth blade with one hand, he was dumbfounded. Sha Maru was dumbfounded. This is the Ichthyosaur King? Sha Maru was not the only one who was dumbfounded. The 4 Dao-seeking great demons were also dumbfounded. That was Sha Maru's famous killer move. In the entire royal city, few people in the same realm could resist its power of chewing. Not even the previous Ichthyosaur King. However, this time, the Ichthyosaur King actually broke through the law enforcer with his bare hands. Jia Zhen Songhai. While they were distracted, the old turtle launched a mountain-like tortoiseshell, covering all 4 Dao-seeking great demons. Among them, Yu Ding's follower was the weakest. His body was directly lowered and he knelt on the ground. Go to hell! The old turtle slapped this person's head. In an instant, this Dao-seeking great demon was torn apart. Facing the attacks of the others, with the protection of the turtle, the 3 people besieging Gui Sanqing were speechless. Not many people liked to fight with turtles. They were born with a shell, and the stronger they were, the harder their shell would be. The 4 of them wanted to capture Gui Sanqing and bombard him thousands of times, but one of them died first. The old turtle said to Han Fei via voice transmission, "When will you let him go?" "Wait a minute. Wait until I get out of the secret realm first." In Sha Maru's chewing domain, the tooth blade was shattered and the domain was about to be broken. Sha Maru frowned. The Fish Dragon King must have a big opportunity on this trip. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to break his domain so easily. They were all powerhouses in the top 10 of the Heavenly Talent list. There had never been a mysterious figure on this list. Now, seeing that the Fish Dragon King's strength had improved greatly, Shamaru turned around and left. After this confrontation, Shamaru confirmed that the Fish Dragon King must have a big opportunity this time. Not to mention how the Fish Dragon King broke free from the Soul Forbidden net, the Fish Dragon King's strength alone had already surpassed his. His physique was so strong that it left people speechless. Shamaru roared, "Uncle Bai, retreat!" However, Shamaru was surprised to find that the battle dozens of kilometers away was far more intense than on his side. However, the battle was blocked in a space. Shamaru took a look and immediately retreated. Han Fei pretended to be temporarily blocked by the chewing domain, and when Shamaru was about to reach the exit, he blasted the domain with a bang. Shamaru was shocked. So fast. How did he break through my domain so quickly? Shamaru couldn't care less. The Fish Dragon King's strength was beyond his expectation. He had to find other ways to kill it in the future. Shamaru was relieved after leaving the secret realm. Looking at Gubuyu again, he had long since disappeared without a trace. Just when Shamaru was about to escape, he sensed that the Fish Dragon King had already left the secret realm. Hiss! It's out already? Swish! Swish! The distance between them seemed to have been shortened by half. Shamaru was horrified. He wasn't strong enough to tear the void and couldn't escape through the void. Therefore, in terms of speed, he was much slower than the Fish Dragon King. In just a few seconds, Han Fei had caught up with him and said with a smile, "You want to leave after ambushing me? Do you think you can set up an ambush whenever you want and leave whenever you want?" Shamaru roared and the void shook. The sound waves stacked and rushed at Han Fei. Shamaru said, "Even if you have a big opportunity, so what? Your strength is weaker than mine by a level. Do you think you can make up for it with an opportunity?" Bam! 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 Shamaru was answered by the Monkey King 3000 strike. The 3000 cascading waves smashed the sound waves in an instant. Shamaru blocked it with the two long knives in his hand. However, the moment he touched the long spear, Shamaru was shocked. "How can you be so strong?" Bm. Han Fei's figure flashed back and forth in the void. The long rod in his hand broke Shamaru's bones and blood flowed out. Shamaru roared, "Fish Dragon King, you can't kill me. My status is higher than yours. If you kill me, you will only bring trouble to yourself." Han Fei said disdainfully, "Maybe you don't know your current situation. Unless you go through the tribulation now and attract the attention of the venerables or the kings in the city, you will definitely die today." Shamaru was horrified. At this moment, he was covered with wounds. Wasn't he courting death if he went through the tribulation now? However, on second thought, the Fish Dragon King must not want to kill me directly, so he let me go through the tribulation. If he killed me with the power of the heavenly tribulation, he could get rid of me. Shamaru immediately shouted, "Do you think I don't dare to go through the tribulation?" As he spoke, Shamaru's strength suddenly skyrocketed, multiplying several times. The two knives forcibly blocked Han Fei's attack. Shamaru felt that the Fish Dragon King wanted to kill him with the heavenly tribulation, but why couldn't he protect himself with the heavenly tribulation? Although there might be some room for improvement in the sea spirit realm, it was not impossible to give up that space. If a heavenly talent like him went through the tribulation, he would definitely attract the attention of the venerables. At that time, if Han Fei attacked him again, someone would scold and stop him. Besides, during the tribulation, the Fish Dragon King couldn't attack him. Otherwise, the heavenly tribulation would definitely attack him. Shamaru directly released all the restraints on himself, and his strength soared. He was about to go through the tribulation. Han Fei looked at the rolling thunderclouds in the sky and was overjoyed. "That's right. If you don't go through the tribulation, what's the point of killing you? At the moment when the tribulation clouds began to gather, Han Fei suddenly rushed into the range of the tribulation clouds. Shamaru roared in shock, "Are you crazy? Could it be that you want to perish together with me?" Han Fei's figure flickered, and he had already inserted one hand into Shamaru's back, and the void lines began to crazily devour Shamaru's vitality. Baibei Royal City. Chang Shui-Qin was calculating that the return of the Fish Dragon King should be in 1 or 2 days. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat and he stood up abruptly. "Hey! Someone is going through the tribulation?" Chang Shui-Qin frowned. The place of the tribulation shouldn't be far away. Why did it choose to go through the tribulation here? It was either someone from the royal city or a sea monster. But what if those wild sea spirits wanted to go through the tribulation and enter the royal city? The place they chose was a little far away. Immediately, Chang Shui-Qin's pupils constricted, and he murmured, "The Fish Dragon King?" Not only did Chang Shui-Qin notice the strangeness, but many venerables also noticed it. They seemed to be confused about who was going through the tribulation. However, when someone saw Chang Shui-Qin and another venerable tearing the void, they didn't get involved. In the royal city, in a palace on the peak of a certain mountain, a perception penetrated through. The tribulation was a divine punishment, and even kings couldn't see through it at this moment. However, they could also see a blurry picture. Huh? The kid who awakened the Dragon King bloodline? The moment Han Fei entered the range of the heavenly tribulation, the taste of the heavenly tribulation had changed. Shamaru's vitality had been devoured by Han Fei, and he had already died. Now, because he used the sky-stealing technique frequently, the efficiency was almost twice as high as when he was in the Thousand Mountains ancient realm. Now, Han Fei could transform the vitality of one person into more than 2 years' worth of vitality. As soon as Shamaru died, Han Fei, who had devoured Shamaru's vitality, pretended to start the tribulation. That was Han Fei's purpose. Originally, he planned to continue to hide his strength, but in case someone saw through him, he might as well pretend that the Fish Dragon King was going through the tribulation. Then, he could really use the power of the Tao-seeking state. Who could see through him then? Roar! When the tribulation clouds gathered, thunder rumbled in the sky. When Chang Shui-Qin and the others crossed the void, Han Fei was pretending to pass the third heavenly tribulation. This heavenly tribulation was purple. Chang Shui-Qin and the others couldn't help but gasp when they saw it. At this moment, a golden dragon phantom came out of Han Fei's body and rushed to the heavenly tribulation. An earth-shaking dragon roar resounded across the sea. The second update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1270. Han Fei passed the third thunderbolt under the nose of Chang Shui-Qin and the others. At that moment, Han Fei was covered in scorch marks. There was no longer a picture of blood splashing on the sea. However, when the spiritual fruits appeared and were swallowed by Han Fei pretended not to see them and simply swallowed them. In fact, Han Fei didn't need to count to know that someone must be watching him at this moment. On the other side, in the secret realm, seeing that Han Fei had succeeded, the old turtle pretended to make a mistake, let 2 people go, killed another one, and snatched the sun-moon shell. Of course, it wasn't that the old turtle couldn't kill those people, but that he couldn't. Otherwise, he, a demigod, would have to face 4 enemies, 3 of whom were evenly matched with him. In the end, it was killed by him alone. Didn't that mean that he had surpassed the prodigies by a lot? Thus, the old turtle killed 2 of them. They were the followers of Yu Ding and Gubu. Moreover, my acting was quite realistic. It looked as if my turtle shell had cracked. I made it look as if I had spent a lot of effort to kill 2 people. Bang! When a shark and a half-mermaid rushed out of the secret realm, the tribulation clouds in the sky hadn't completely dispersed. They could only see that someone was charred black on the surface of the sea. It seemed that he had succeeded in his tribulation. The old tortoise followed the two and appeared on the surface of the sea. He looked at Han Fei and looked at the two monsters. By Wushu, I will report what you did to me. How dare you attempt to assassinate the Dragon King's young master? This is a violation of King City's laws. In the distance, several venerable ones scanned the area with their perception and looked at each other. They already knew what was going on. Someone glanced at Zhang Shueqin. Are you going to handle this, or should I enforce the law? Zhang Shueqin glanced at him and said, You do it. I'm only in charge of the trial. It's fine as long as the Fish Dragon King isn't dead. The person beside Zhang Shueqin nodded slightly. He took a step forward and his pressure descended. The man waved his hand toward the sky, summoning thousands of lightning arcs from the tribulation clouds that had yet to dissipate. Han Fei's current state was just a disguise. Of course, he saw this scene, and his heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. This person is very domineering. The lightning power dissipating from the tribulation cloud was actually all captured by him. At that moment, a person appeared in Han Fei's mind, the law enforcer of the royal city, Hai Tinglei. A heavenly spirit skate that had cultivated to the venerable realm was a great demon that could devour all the lightning in the world. This was one of the few experts in the White Shell capital city, an expert who had experienced 4 heavenly tribulations. As expected, this person was also undergoing the 4-9 monarch tribulation. But there were also people who said, swallowing thunder and eating electricity is only the great Tao of listening to thunder. In fact, he had forcefully swallowed the 4th lightning bolt during his tribulation. Either way, Hai Tinglei was a true expert. At this moment, Hai Tinglei appeared and his might descended. Everyone's spirits were shaken. The old turtle bowed his head and said, Law enforcer. Shark Maru and Yu Guang's followers were also horrified. Greetings, Lord Enforcer. Hai Tinglei casually reached into the void with one hand and directly grabbed Gubuyu, who had escaped for a while, and brought him back. Gubuyu's face was filled with terror. When she saw it was Hai Tinglei, her face suddenly changed, and she hurriedly said respectfully, Greetings, Lord Enforcer. Hai Tinglei snorted softly, and Gubuyu knelt down, blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. Then Hai Tinglei glanced at Bai Wushu and Shark Maru. Gubuyu, Yu Guang, Shark Maru. Me and one more. With that, Hai Tinglei's big hand blasted through the previous secret realm, and with a slight surprise, he grabbed 4 incomplete bodies. Among them, Yu Guang and Yu Ding had already died, along with 2 Tao-seeking state great demons. Hai Tinglei couldn't help but take a deep look at the old turtle, and said in a slightly low voice, Gui Sanqing, did you also have an opportunity? Gui Sanqing hurriedly said, Lord Enforcer, young master had an opportunity to sort out the hidden diseases in my body and improve my strength. Hai Tinglei couldn't help but glance at Han Fei. Gui Sanqing's words seemed reasonable. Gui Sanqing was not weak, and it was useless for the 4 Tao-seeking demons to kill him. His original body was a turtle, and his defense power was terrifying. Even if he was attacked by a venerable, he could still resist. But how could Gui Sanqing kill 2 of them under the siege of 4 of them? This was very surprising. This was not something that an ordinary semi-venerable could do. Han Fei was surrounded by demonic energy. Hai Tinglei glanced at Zhang Shueqin. Anyway, he's going to the Forbidden Land level secret realm. Giving him some resources now is not a special help. Zhang Shueqin nodded slightly, waved his hand, and a huge amount of spiritual spring wrapped Han Fei, and threw out 100 spiritual fruits. This time, the Fish Dragon King survived, which was really beyond his expectation. Giving him some spiritual spring and spiritual fruits was nothing. Besides, venerable ones were not interested in these things at all. Of course, Han Fei had to cooperate with the absorption. Seeing a spiritual energy vortex appear, the unstable strength of a beginner Tao-seeking state cultivator began to gradually stabilize. Seeing this, Hai Tinglei glanced at Gu Buyu and the other two who were still alive. Gu Buyu, Yu Guang, Shark Maru, and Yu Ding conspired without authorization to ambush the Fish Dragon King, a heavenly talent of the royal city. Can you refute this crime? At this point, who dared to refute it? The venerables were not fools. Gu Buyu immediately shook his head. Buyu pleads guilty. Please punish me, Lord Law Enforcer. Hai Tinglei was expressionless and snorted. Since the Fish Dragon King is not dead, Shark Maru, Yu Guang, and Yu Ding deserve to die. Gu Buyu is sentenced to guard the Wall of Death for 30 years. Any objections? Hearing the words, Wall of Death, Gu Buyu trembled all over and gritted his teeth. Buyu accepts the punishment. Hai Tinglei grunted softly and ignored Gu Buyu. Instead, he looked at the other two. By Wushu Yu Qing, although it's not wrong for you to follow your master on the path of cultivation, choices are also very important. You will be sentenced to guard the demon ceiling tower for 30 years. Any objections? Both of them trembled at the same time. Han Fei seemed to be able to sense their fear. He thought to himself, where is the demon suppressing tower? He knew that the Wall of Death was the empty sea that isolated the 36 Xiantian realms. The so-called guard was actually equivalent to exile. Gu Buyu was also a heavenly talent. If he was exiled and left to fend for himself for 30 years, the capital would no longer provide resources and trial support. At that time, if Gu Buyu worked hard enough, he could still search for some opportunities near the Wall of Death on his own and catch up with the heavenly talents of the capital. But the demon ceiling tower didn't exist in the Fish Dragon King's memory. Wait. Han Fei suddenly thought of something. It wasn't that there was no such thing. In the Fish Dragon King's memory, there was news about forbidden areas. It seemed that this demon ceiling tower was one of the main forbidden areas. However, the Fish Dragon King had never challenged a forbidden area because he once challenged a purgatory-level difficulty and felt that he was about to die. After coming out, he was half dead and had to recuperate for 3 months. Seeing that the two semi-venerables were trembling, Han Fei couldn't help but think, it seems that I also have to go to the Forbidden Land-level trial field. He couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. I'm afraid it won't be easy. Bai Wushu and Yu Qing lowered their heads and said in unison, no objections. Han Fei thought to himself, they're already scared to death and still have no objections? It seems that this Hai Tinglei's deterrence is very strong. Seeing that the two had no objections, Hai Tinglei nodded slightly and looked at Changshuiken. It seems that the Fish Dragon King's trip is not small. Since you're not guilty, I won't stay any longer. When the time comes, Shark Ball, Yu Guang, and Yu Ding's properties will be sent to the Fish Dragon King's residence. But since Gu Buyu survived and was sent to guard the place, the resources will be left. Changshuiken nodded slightly. Okay, you decide. I'll wait here. Hai Tinglei reached out and grabbed the 3 of them and took them away. The other 2 venerables didn't show up at all. They just glanced at them, learned the result, and then left. After half an hour, Han Fei slowly woke up, and the scorched flesh on his body cracked and shattered. When he saw Changshuiken, Han Fei pretended to be stunned and hurriedly said, Venerable? Changshuiken smiled faintly. It seems that you did have a lot of opportunities on this trip. No wonder you have the courage to challenge the difficulty of a forbidden area. Since you want to challenge it, you've chosen the path yourself. You have to walk on it. Since you are forced to go through the tribulation, I will give you half a month to consolidate your strength and give you a life-saving means. You will enter the trial in half a month. Han Fei complained in his heart, you've misunderstood me. If I knew that time equals danger, I would have gone to the capital long ago. Why would I waste my time outside? However, of course, Han Fei couldn't say this now. It was probably God's will that he had to go to this forbidden land. Han Fei seemed to have a sense of pride from the bottom of his heart. Thank you, Your Excellency. The Dragon King has been preparing for this trip for a long time. I must try my best in that forbidden land. Anyway, going to the forbidden land was inevitable. Han Fei had no other choice but to make it sound better. Besides, since it could be called a forbidden land, it must be dangerous and opportunity coexisting. The more dangerous it was, the greater the degree of the opportunity and the trial. Others might have to worry about dying in it, but as long as the so-called forbidden land was not extremely strong, they would not be afraid of it. Since he wasn't afraid of challenging someone of a higher cultivation level, why couldn't he give it a try? Seeing Han Fei's expression, Changshuiken couldn't help but chuckle. Fish Dragon King, I haven't seen your strength with my own eyes. However, I find that you are getting more and more arrogant. I hope you can come back alive from any forbidden land. By then, I'll be waiting to see you enter the top 5. The third update. I didn't get home until 5 o'clock today. I just revised the article and was half an hour late. I've been a little busy recently. Life events are waiting for me to solve. End of this chapter. Chapter 1271. The Sea Demon King City was the holy land in the eyes of all the sea demons. At this moment, it was unfolding in front of Han Fei's eyes. This was still a trench. Looking from the outside, this trench was very wide. The crack seemed to be hundreds of kilometers long. From the surface of the sea to the depth of the trench, it was nearly 80 kilometers. From the depth of the trench to the King City, it was more than 20 kilometers. In this way, from the surface of the sea to the White Shell King City, it had to be 100 kilometers deep. This also meant that even peak-level hidden fishers wouldn't find a magnificent city under their feet when passing by on the surface of the sea. When Han Fei entered the trench, he seemed to have fallen into some kind of barrier. He immediately discovered that there was a problem with the pressure here. When he came down from the trench, the water pressure suddenly became countless times lighter. This feeling was the same as the feeling of being hundreds of meters under the sea. Han Fei was stunned. What's going on? The old turtle said, What's the fuss about? Since there is a king guarding this area, the entire trench can be sealed. You can think of this place as the sea surface. The deeper you go, the pressure is the same as the normal seawater. Han Fei didn't speak, and Changshuiken had already left. When he just entered the trench, someone had already scanned him. When Han Fei took a closer look, he found that at the entrance of the trench, about a kilometer deep, there were 2 huge stone turtles lying on the left and the right. Each of them was more than 300 meters long, and they were still alive. The old turtle roared, Damn it, how dare he let my people guard the gate? This king deserves to die. Han Fei said contemptuously, Hey, hey, hey! Don't pretend to be close to me. There are so many kinds of turtles. Since when are they your clansmen? The old turtle said, I am the strongest of the turtle clan. Why can't I be the ancestor of all turtles in the world? Han Fei said contemptuously, Don't brag. If another big turtle surpasses the Emperor realm, it might trample through the void and kill you. The old turtle snorted. What do you know? Those stronger than me should be dead. Seeming to realize that he had said something wrong, the old turtle's voice stopped abruptly and he didn't say a word. Han Fei frowned. Those stronger than the old turtle should be dead, right? The old tortoise had personally said that one could become an emperor with longevity and become a god with the Tao. This meant that, as far as the old turtle knew, there were at least 2 more realms above the emperor realm. Han Fei vaguely guessed that there must be a big secret. For the gods to fall, how big of a thing must have happened? However, these secrets were not something that could be figured out just by thinking about it. That involved too much history. Before the end of days, perhaps there was an even longer history. Han Fei swam all the way to the capital. In his memory, King City was in the center of the sea, about 3,000 miles away from here. This was because the trench did not reach the bottom in one go. There was a gradual downward slope. Therefore, Han Fei saw a lot of luminous creatures. When Han Fei walked 100 kilometers, he found that most of the creatures here were luminous. Even the most common seaweed was luminous seaweed. There were schools of fish, shells, crabs, starfish, conches, sea anemones, sea cucumbers, jellyfish. There were too many species to count. The strength of these creatures was not strong. Han Fei even saw a large number of creatures that had just been awakened, and there were also many creatures that had fully awakened and developed intelligence. They seemed to have long been accustomed to the appearance of strong masters. So, there was no need to be afraid at all. After all, the strong masters wouldn't have nothing better to do than to fight them. As he continued to move forward, the creatures Han Fei encountered became stronger and stronger. From the ordinary creatures at the beginning to some sea beasts, such as serpents, octopuses, king squids, emperor belts, giant conches, and countless others. These creatures didn't seem to have territorial awareness, and they probably didn't dare to have territorial awareness. In Han Fei's memory, the reason why these creatures could appear outside the King City was that someone specially searched for them and brought them back. They also needed to go through some training, battles, and killings. After being eliminated again and again, the strong had a chance to enter the King City. When Han Fei returned to the city, he changed into the Fish Dragon King's clothes and hung up his exclusive ID card. This card was actually the Demon Heritage level card. In the Sea Demon King City, strength was not what mattered to those below the venerable level, but demonic heritage. As soon as Han Fei took out his purple card, those who saw it retreated. They were the top heavenly talents with level 7 demonic heritage and the highest status in the King City. Some creatures could see that Han Fei's waist card was a level 8 low-quality demonic heritage, so they didn't dare to block his way. On the way to the King City, the strongest expert Han Fei had seen was only at the peak level of the Sea Spirit state, and there were no Tao-seeking state creatures wandering outside the King City. At this moment, Han Fei looked at the mountain in front of him and was quite amazed. This place was dazzling. The White Shell King City was not large, only about 50 kilometers in length and breadth. However, the construction of the King City was extremely splendid. The ancient gate, which was 10,000 meters long and thousands of meters high, had the words White Shell King City written on it solemnly. Han Fei felt that his eyes were a little sore after just a few more glances. He had experienced this feeling when he explored the Fiery Mountain, the strongest secret realm in the Level 2 fishery. These 4 words were a great technique. His million knife art and 10,000 knives in one were deduced from the words on the Fiery Mountain. Although Han Fei wanted to push out this technique in front of him, he would definitely be noticed if he stayed at the gate for a long time. But now, the last thing Han Fei wanted was to be noticed. It would be great if he could keep a low profile so that no one would notice him. Also, at the gate of the city, there was a row of shrimp soldiers and crab generals. There was a group every 1,000 meters, and there were 10 groups in total. If he were to stand here and read the words, people would think that he was an idiot, wouldn't they? Although the gate was 10,000 meters long, there were 2 jade pillars that were made of blue jade, 100 meters thick and 1,000 meters high, that were even more magnificent than the gate. On the left and right pillars, there were 10 words, Heaven and Earth contain mysteries, Waterfall Hidden Dragon City. The 2 pillars stood on both sides like 2 vertical lamps. The pillar-shaped luminous pearls illuminated the surroundings. Han Fei landed here and looked at the 2 groups of shrimp soldiers and crab generals in front of him, who were saluting him, but he didn't say anything. After all, they were just gate guards and they were on duty. Even if they knew him, they couldn't say hello to him at work, could they? Maintaining the Fish Dragon King's usual arrogance, Han Fei simply ignored these shrimp soldiers and didn't even nod at them. This gate was actually equivalent to a portal. Outside the gate, he could only vaguely see some blurry scenes of the capital. In fact, the capital was surrounded by a layer of water mist. When Han Fei stepped into the gate, his eyes suddenly opened up. The first thing that came into view was a splendid golden palace. Above the 1,000-meter water area was the living space of some sea beasts and jellyfish. Among them, there were powerful jellyfish, like giant light bulbs, their bodies emitting various colors of light, illuminating the entire capital. And the roof of the ancient building that seemed to be paved with gold almost blinded Han Fei's eyes. This immediately reminded Han Fei of Master Hexagon. What if it saw this? It would love this place to death. How did the king of this capital become a king? In another area of the sea, in another palace, there were all kinds of dazzling treasures and stones. A big starfish with 6 tentacles was lying on this pile of treasures. Who else could it be but the hexagon starfish? Around the starfish, a big octopus was kneading the starfish's tentacles, and a clam girl stood beside the starfish. Occasionally, the starfish raised its tentacles, and the clam girl would pick up the jar in her hand and pour a dark green liquid. Swish! Suddenly, the starfish's 6 tentacles suddenly lit up. The starfish couldn't help but shiver and murmur, "Why am I making a breakthrough again? Alas, I have to consolidate my strength again. When will it end?" Han Fei looked at the splendid palace, which looked a bit like the Dragon Palace on TV. It seemed that there were all kinds of rare treasures hidden here. However, the golden-laid fish bones and aquatic plants were so stylish that Han Fei couldn't help but return to reality. Han Fei looked to the right, stepped into the air, and flew to the cave house where he was. That was the Fish Dragon King's cave house. Many of the Fish Dragon King's treasures were left at home. Different from the outer sea, in the Baibei royal city, there was no such thing as stealing. If you were strong enough, you could steal. But if you were discovered, you would be banished from the capital forever. In the Baibei royal city, everything you wanted could be fought for in the trial secret realms instead of by stealing. Therefore, each and every household's cave abode had a specific array formation planned out. Once there was an abnormal change in the array, someone would notice it immediately. At that time, it would be impossible to escape. It was 50 kilometers long and could accommodate 100,000 people. Except for those who lived in the sky above the capital and acted as light bulbs, there were even fewer people in the city. However, when Han Fei rushed to to the Fish Dragon King's residence, he found that dozens of people were waiting at the gate of the residence. Han Fei was intrigued. What's going on? Are they blocking the gate to cause trouble? First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1272. In front of the Fish Dragon King's residence, dozens of people blocked the gate and seemed to be waiting. Needless to say, they were waiting for the Fish Dragon King, which was Han Fei now. When Han Fei entered the city, these people seemed to have known that Han Fei had arrived. So, they all turned their backs to the gate and looked in the direction where Han Fei came from. Han Fei scanned with his senses and found that although there were familiar faces in this group of people, there were no familiar faces of heavenly talents. These people seemed to be the servants of some heavenly talents. They shouldn't be here to make trouble. Suddenly, Han Fei turned his head and looked at a high-rise building 10 kilometers away. Someone was looking at him with scorching eyes. Han Fei was stunned and thought, "What's the meaning of this?" When Han Fei took a closer look, he was slightly stunned. Sure enough, there were still experts on the heavenly talent ranking paying attention to him. This person was neither a half-merman nor a merman, but a shrimp man. However, he couldn't be called a shrimp soldier, because this person was ranked 6th on the heavenly talent ranking and had the strongest shrimp clan bloodline in the Baibei royal city. This person was named Prawn Yue. He was wearing bright red armor and a shiny helmet. On the helmet there were 2 crystal and sharp shrimp whiskers. This person had 2 feet and 6 hands, each holding a sharp thorn. The two of them looked at each other, and Han Fei immediately remembered Prawn Yue's voice transmission. "I heard that you had a lot of opportunities this time. You killed Shark Maru and Yu Guang in one battle? And you even passed the tribulation in advance?" Han Fei realized that this person hadn't passed the tribulation yet, had he? Among the top 10 of the heavenly talent ranking, only the top 3 had passed the tribulation. However, a guy named Zhang Xiaotian, who was ranked 4th, refused to pass the tribulation. This person bluntly said that he was ranked 4th and was waiting for someone to replace him. As a result, the top 3 of the heavenly talent ranking in the Baibei royal city never needed to fight. Zhang Xiaotian didn't refuse anyone who wanted to fight. Because Zhang Xiaotian refused to pass the tribulation, none of the people behind him passed the tribulation. Heavenly talents were all proud creatures. If someone was so strong without passing the tribulation, how could they, as heavenly talents, pass the tribulation easily? Han Fei frowned. If it weren't for the special circumstances, why would I pass the tribulation? Pran Yue nodded in agreement. That's right. Only those who survive have the right to be proud. Shark Ball and Yu Guang, it looks like you've underestimated your opportunity this time. Han Fei curled his lips and said, hee hee. They just know that this Dragon King wants to barge into the Forbidden Grounds and are worried that I will be too strong and break through their positions. How is that underestimating? The corners of Pran Yue's mouth curled up into a smile. You're already so proud when you face me now. It seemed that there was indeed a great opportunity at the front lines this time. Since you're so confident, then let me see what gives you such confidence. Han Fei frowned. This shrimp Yue doesn't seem weak. Although Xiao Chen did not take it to heart, if he displayed the appearance of consecutively defeating the experts of the proud Son of Heaven ranking and rising through the ranks like a hot knife through butter, it would seem a little too fast. In Han Fei's impression, Pran Yue was ranked 6th, but he was one of the top 5 goalkeepers. He had once declared that he could challenge Zhang Xiaotian first, and only by defeating him would he have the right to challenge Zhang Xiaotian. The Fish Dragon King once challenged this person and suffered a crushing defeat after taking 13 attacks. The old turtle said, this person shouldn't be weak either. If my guess is correct, he should be a refined fire shrimp spirit who has cultivated into a human being. His defense, speed, control of fire elements, and gung metal armor are all excellent. Unfortunately, his demonic heritage is not strong enough. He's much weaker than I was back then. Han Fei sweated. Old Yuan, has anyone ever told you that you're narcissistic? The old turtle snorted. I'm telling the truth. Ignoring the old turtle, Han Fei glanced at Pran Yue indifferently. When I come back from the Forbidden Grounds, you'll be the first one I challenge. Poochie! Suddenly, a chuckle echoed, and a woman in a green dress walked out of a red jellyfish-shaped building. The woman smiled and said, Fish Dragon King, are you afraid of a fight? Are you going to refuse a fight? Han Fei knew this woman. She was a clam girl named Green Silk Spirit, who ranked 5th. She was a talkative clam demon, but her strength was not to be underestimated. In Han Fei's memory, the Fish Dragon King had never fought this woman. In fact, very few people dared to challenge this woman, because this woman had taken the Hell Level trial 8 times in a row and returned safely. However, this woman reminded him that the Fish Dragon King was an extremely proud person. In the face of a challenge, even if he was no match for his opponent, he couldn't back down. A battle was definitely going to happen. Immediately, Han Fei stopped in midair and looked at the two of them casually. I don't fight just because of the Forbidden Grounds. Do you think I'm scared? The Green Silk Spirit chuckled. Aren't you? Or could it be that you, the Fish Dragon King, have become timid after being ambushed once? At this moment, Han Fei sensed thousands of senses scanning him. How many people were watching this scene? After all, many people were curious about his current strength after he killed Shark Ball and Fishlight in the outer sea. If it were the Fish Dragon King in the past, Pran Yue wouldn't have come to challenge him, because he was very sure that the Fish Dragon King was no match for him. But now, Han Fei had killed the 8th and 9th heavenly talents on the heavenly talent list, and his rank had risen to the 8th. If there was no accident, his strength should have improved a lot. Now, Pran Yue and the others just wanted to see Han Fei's strength. Han Fei thought, although this ambush was quite secretive, the law enforcers of the royal city have already punished them. If I'm not mistaken, They have already reported it. After all, for Hai Tinglei and the other strong masters, this was their job. It was not a good idea to let the royal city be lifeless every day. They had to make some noise from time to time. Han Fei thought, I'm afraid I can't avoid this battle. At this point, if I still avoid the battle, it wouldn't be in line with the Fish Dragon King's personality. One must know that when he first met the Ichthyosaur King, it was so excited to beat up a bunch of guys who were much weaker than it was. Now, he had no reason to avoid this kind of battle. Han Fei suddenly grinned. When have I ever been afraid of a battle? Don't you just want to see my current strength? Since you want to see it, I'll show you carefully. Prawn Yue grinned. This is the Fish Dragon King I know. In that case, let's fight. After that, Prawn Yue's whole body was burning, and with a swish, he rose into the sky like a flame and went straight to the sky. In the Baibei royal city, fighting was a hot-blooded thing. Only through fighting could the gap in strength and realm be reflected. Therefore, the sea demons thought that this was something that could be admired by tens of thousands of people. Just like in the arena of the 10,000 Demon Valley, countless people watched as if they were watching a game. In the Baibei royal city, the battlefield was not in the buildings, nor underground, but in the sky above the royal city. It was 3,000 meters above the Baibei royal city, and there was a king's seal. You could enter and fight, but the aftermath of the battle wouldn't be affected. Once you touched the seal, you would be stopped. Han Fei glanced at the gate of the Fish Dragon King's house. Those people were also watching and didn't seem to be in a hurry to wait for a while. Han Fei activated the close distance technique and crossed 1,000 meters with one step. In 2 steps, he had already appeared in the sky. The close distance technique was the standard symbol of the Fish Dragon King. At this moment, he had to use it. When the two of them reached the sky, the sea beasts that were wandering above the royal city all gave way to them. Han Fei didn't expect that he would have to perform in front of the whole city. As soon as he came to the Baibei royal city, Shrimp Yue said, "You've just passed the tribulation and haven't had time to consolidate your strength. I won't embarrass you. You can use the power of the Tao-seeking state." Han Fei sneered. "Do you think I'll take advantage of you? I've never been afraid of someone in the sea spirit state." In the city, many people scanned their senses, and more people walked out of their homes. A servant with a level 6 demonic heritage exclaimed, "The experts on the heavenly talent list are really terrifying. They are already so strong, but they still fight all day long." Someone sneered. "Do you think they are the same as us? Which one of those who can become a supreme prodigy is easy?" Someone sighed. "Do you think the Fish Dragon King has a chance this time?" Someone couldn't help but say, "Of course, no matter how fast his strength grows, he can't possibly challenge Shrimp Yue from the 10th place on the heavenly talent list, can he?" Someone guessed, "If the Fish Dragon King doesn't suppress his realm, he won't lose anyway, right?" Someone pondered. "The point is, how can he not suppress his realm?" Apart from the ordinary people discussing, some heavenly talents were also watching coldly. For example, a bald young man suddenly appeared beside Qing Si Ling and said calmly, "To be able to take on 4 opponents at once, you're not weak." Qing Si Ling was surprised. "Xiaotian, when did you come back?" This little bald man was Zhang Xiaotian, who was ranked 4th. He was in the purgatory trial, but now he had returned. Zhang Xiaotian looked up at the sky. "It's boring, so I came back. I wanted to try the Forbidden Land trial, but the Fish Dragon King was 1 step ahead of me." In a certain palace, a venerable turned his head. At this moment, he was also watching the battle. There were few things that could attract their attention now. The heavenly talent battle was just a show. After all, not all venerable ones cultivated wholeheartedly. Most of the venerables were quite practical. Some venerables who had no hope of breaking through were even more bored. In the sky, Han Fei pretended to lower his realm, holding the red spear as if he were holding a red light. Han Fei said, "Since when can a shrimp be compared to me? Look at my spear." Second update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1273. Under the gaze of thousands of people, Han Fei attacked. The spear light was simple, but the spear technique dumbfounded countless people. Han Fei raised his foot and disappeared. While Han Fei disappeared, Prawn Yue held the 6 ice thorns in his hands. In an instant they pierced through the void. Within a kilometer, a giant cone appeared in the void at an extremely fast speed. Han Fei appeared in this space. The moment he appeared, he moved his body. The instant mystic spear in his hand had been thrown out. As if the distance between them had been shortened, he appeared directly in front of Prawn Yue. Huh! When Han Fei launched this attack, many people saw the clues. In the outer sea, Han Fei mostly encountered sea spirits and Tao-seeking great demons. Usually, he wouldn't use the instant mystic spear. Usually, he would use his strongest strength to kill them directly. At this moment, in the Baibei royal city, where sea spirits and Tao-seekers were everywhere, Han Fei's movement was immediately noticed by some people. Chang Shuai-Qin was slightly surprised. The law of time? A venerable was puzzled. He's mastered the law of space and the law of time at the same time? This fish dragon king is indeed capable. It seems that the Dragon King bloodline can't be underestimated. In midair, at the moment when time froze, Prawn Yue was shocked, thinking that his mind was wandering. Flames burst out on the thorns in his hands and blocked in front of him like a fire shield. With a crisp ding, a seemingly weak ripple spread out dozens of kilometers in the sky, almost covering the entire White Bell's capital city. Crack, crack, crack. Clang, clang, clang. Cracks could be seen on the flame shield, but taking advantage of the moment when the flame shield was about to shatter, Prawn Yue's 6 limbs flapped and attacked more than 30 times. His figure explosively retreated, only then was he able to withstand the attack. At this moment, Prawn Yue's arms trembled slightly. How did the Fish Dragon King become so fast? Also, its power was more than 30% stronger than the Fish Dragon King's. Down below, Zhang Xiaotian's pupils constricted. It's the law of time. The Fish Dragon King has mastered the law of time. No wonder he could kill Shamaru and Yu Guang. Qing Si Ling couldn't help but frown. The law of time? Isn't it the law of space? How did it become the law of time? Zhang Xiaotian shook his head. No, time paused for a split second when the spear projection was pointed. However, the Ichthyosaur King's grasp of it is not exquisite enough. It should be because the time it took to comprehend it was too short. Otherwise, Prawn Yue would have already been defeated. Prawn Yue retracted his expression. The Ichthyosaur King was indeed no longer the Ichthyosaur King of the past. Just this move alone was worthy of him taking it seriously. Han Fei was also surprised. The close-distance technique, coupled with momentary time, was actually blocked? This meant that Yue's reaction speed was extremely fast. Also, Han Fei found that the 2 tentacles were gone. He took a step forward and crossed 1,000 meters. The 2 tentacles were like invisible whips in the air, brushing past his chest and cheek. In the eyes of outsiders, Han Fei almost slid past the 2 extremely sharp cracks in the void. If they were not careful, they would be torn apart. But in this shocking scene, Han Fei didn't even look back and stabbed the spear back. With this stab, the demonic qi turned into a dragon and charged forward. Prawn Yue smiled disdainfully. You still have the cheek to use such methods? Halfway through his words, Prawn Yue's face suddenly changed. He felt that his soul was shaken and a terrifying soul stab hit him. Puff! Blood spurted out of Prawn Yue's 7 orifices. Yes, blood spurted out. Unprepared, he took Han Fei's soul-stunning spike head-on. Of course he was injured. However, Han Fei hadn't mastered the soul-stunning spike after all. Half of the god-scaring painting hadn't been fully unfolded yet. Otherwise, if he had the complete version of the soul-stunning spike, he wouldn't dare to use it. No matter how many changes the Ichthyosaur King had, It was impossible for him to not only master the law of time but also a super powerful soul attack technique in just a few months. The reason why Han Fei dared to use it was that he hadn't mastered the law of time or the soul-stunning spike. The law of time was imitated by Han Fei. There was always a gap between an imitation and the original one. And he used the soul-stunning spike because the Ichthyosaur King was good at spear technique. The soul-stunning spike was also a spear technique, but it was a soul spear technique. At the moment blood spurted out of Prawn Yue's 7 orifices, the dragon-shaped demonic energy rushed out, making a rumbling sound. In just one confrontation, Han Fei had used 3 killer moves. He wasn't afraid of being exposed. The Ichthyosaur King he disguised as was going to take the trial in the Forbidden Land. It wouldn't make sense if he didn't have some skills. Only then did Han Fei turn around. The spear in his hand vibrated with demonic energy and stabbed at Prawn Yue. Prawn Yue, who had been injured by Han Fei, fought back fiercely. He seemed to be seriously injured, but in fact, he wasn't. The instant mystic spear was blocked, and the soul-stunning spike didn't seriously injure his soul. As for the explosive spike, it only slightly injured Prawn Yue. At this moment, it was time for the fierce battle between the two. Lights and shadows flashed in the air and various combat skills appeared. Under Han Fei's deliberate action, his movement technique and combat skills were weaker than Prawn Yue's. But Han Fei's physique and strength, as well as the power of his soul, had become stronger. After fighting for about half an hour, Han Fei seemed a little tired. But at the same time, Prawn Yue wasn't much better. He could use a combat skill similar to the triple original body like Zhang Xuanyu did, but he still couldn't win. Down below, Qing's silk spirit said solemnly, "Not good. The Ichthyosaur King's strength has soared. He just hasn't fully digested this power yet. If he really survives the trial in the Forbidden Land, I'm afraid his strength will increase by another 20%. Zhang Xiaotian shook his head slightly. The Ichthyosaur King obviously didn't fully absorb the gains from this trip. No wonder he needed to stay outside for such a long time before coming back. He went to the Forbidden Land trial for 5 months and then went to the Forbidden Land trial to hone himself. Once he's exhausted, I'm afraid he can fight us." Qing's silk spirit's eyes turned cold. "Then let him have a try." In the eyes of those heavenly talents and servants with level 6 demonic heritage, such a battle was too unbelievable. This was not the power of a sea spirit at all. It was the power of a Tao-seeking state cultivator. Whether it was a battle of laws, combat skills, or soul, they didn't dare to think too much. Someone sighed. "It's useless to watch such a battle. In a battle of heavenly talents, the laws are superior to ours. Their combat skills are also very special. We can't match them." Some people were excited and thought it's all about cultivation. A level 6 demonic heritage isn't weak. There's a chance that they can become strong. Many Tao-seeking great beasts were thinking, is the Ichthyosaur King worth following? If the Ichthyosaur King can come back alive from the Forbidden Land trial, it's worth considering. As for the Venerables, they were relatively calm. Their views on strength were different because of their different horizons. No matter how talented one was, they had to live until they reached the venerable state. Unless this person had the potential to become a king, no heavenly talent was worthy of their support. "Stop!" A majestic voice came from the sky. A figure appeared. When everyone saw who it was, they lowered their heads. It was the law enforcer of the royal city, Hai Tinglei. Hai Tinglei glanced at the two of them and said indifferently, "Challenges are allowed, but killing is forbidden. In this battle, the Ichthyosaur King has the advantage in the Tao-seeking state, so he'll be ranked 8th on the prodigy list. The rest will automatically take his place." Hai Tinglei made this decision because Han Fei's combat power was weaker than Prawn Yue's. This was something that he deliberately revealed. Otherwise, if the gap in strength was too big, it would inevitably arouse suspicion or doubt. At this moment, Prawn Yue didn't get angry, nor did he look surprised. Instead, He took a deep look at Han Fei. You've improved in all aspects? That's good. I look forward to you challenging me again. Han Fei had never been afraid of a tough guy. He raised his head. Next time, you'll definitely lose. Speaking in this tone, Han Fei felt that his acting skills were on point, which was very in line with the Ichthyosaur King's character. Prawn Yue didn't seem to hear him. He smiled, inserted the spikes into his carapace with his 6 hands at the same time, and turned away. As soon as Prawn Yue left, the crowd dispersed, and everyone looked away. Han Fei felt someone's gaze. He turned his head, only to see a little bald man. He immediately narrowed his eyes. Zhang Xiaotian? In the Ichthyosaur King's memory, he seemed to have challenged this Zhang Xiaotian and was suppressed by him with one hand. And this Zhang Xiaotian was known to be invincible in the sea spirit state. So far, no one had been able to defeat him in the sea spirit state. If it was a challenge, Han Fei would rather suppress his cultivation and fight this person. After all, the top 3 of the heavenly talent list were actually just in name. He had already passed the tribulation. It was said that because he was too talented, his ranking remained in the heavenly talent list. It was said that as long as someone could defeat Zhang Xiaotian, one of the 3 of them would come out. Exchanging a glance with Zhang Xiaotian, Han Fei pretended to be displeased and snorted lightly. In a few steps, he reached the door of the Ichthyosaur King's house. Looking at the people who were still blocking the door, Han Fei said coldly, "What are you doing here?" However, one of them smiled and held a sun-moon shell in his hand. "Lord Dragon King, we are here to deliver something. These are all the resources of Master Yu Ding." Another person also held a sun-moon shell and said, "Master Dragon King, these are all the resources of Master Shamaru." Master Dragon King, Han Fei was almost stunned. F*CKU. Are you here to give me a gift? Why didn't you say so earlier? Third update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1274. Han Fei received 12 sun-moon shells and 16 sea-swallowing seashells in total, which was everyone's resources except for Gubu. Han Fei immediately regretted it. If he had known that the resources of whoever he killed would belong to him, he would have killed Gubuyu as well. The reason why he had spared Gubuyu was because her defense was ranked in the top 5 of the prodigy ranking. Moreover, he also wanted to let go of one person to spread his heroic combat skills. Who knew that before that person could run back to the capital city, he was sentenced. Han Fei didn't know why the 3 of them had 28 storage shells. It should be because Shark Maru and the others had their own accumulation. In any case, this number was very impressive. It was like a pie falling from the sky. If possible, Han Fei hoped that someone would ambush him every day. In this way, maybe he could receive sea-swallowing seashells every day. Han Fei had already simulated the aura of the Fish Dragon King with the art of deception. To put it bluntly, he was now the Ichthyosaur King. Therefore, he wasn't stopped at all when he stepped into the mansion's restriction. After entering the residence, the old tortoise was the first to speak. This restriction is not bad. It is well hidden and is a type of fixed formation. It could blur the prying eyes of venerable ones, but it certainly could not block the prying eyes of a king tier. So, even though we're inside the mansion's restrictions, we still have to act. Han Fei said, "Isn't there only one king in the Baibei royal city? A king wouldn't peep at an elementary Dao-seeking realm cultivator like me, right?" The old turtle pondered for a moment, and his voice sounded in Han Fei's heart. "Generally speaking, they will. The perception of a king could cover every corner of this city, even every speck of dust. Eavesdropping on you is like playing a game." Han Fei's heart tightened. This is too King outrageous. Did kings really have such a fetish? For some reason, he thought of Zhang Xuanyu. If that guy became a king, he would probably like to spy on her people the most, right? Reminded by the old turtle, Han Fei certainly did not dare to do anything out of line. he still maintained the Fish Dragon King's usual arrogant posture. But out of instinct, curiosity, and thirst for knowledge, Han Fei grabbed all the sun-moon shells and sea-swallowing seashells to take a look. Han Fei thought that even a king wouldn't spy on everyone in the capital, would he? How could a mere fish dragon king be worth the attention of a king? Han Fei was taken aback for a moment. Good heavens, how much spirit spring was there? Not daring to say it aloud, Han Fei thought to himself, this is 200,000 caddies, this is 180,000 caddies, this is 280,000 caddies, this is. Han Fei poured all the spiritual spring into a sun-moon shell. After weighing it in his hand, he estimated that it weighed more than 3 million kilograms. In addition to his own reserves, it was close to 4 million caddies. The old tortoise said, "Don't forget, this is your residence now. You should have your own stash." Right, the Fish Dragon King can't bring all his wealth to the front line. Especially for someone as conceited as him, he would never bring all the good stuff to the front lines because he disdained it. Instead of sorting out the resources immediately, Han Fei went straight into the Fish Dragon King's residence. How should he put it? The Ichthyosaur King was quite warlike. Damn it, there wasn't even a chair at home. What came into view were 7 to 8 long spears placed in every corner of the room. There were no decorations on the surrounding walls, only spear marks. Except for one wall. On that wall, the Fish Dragon King made a picture of a Jiao dragon with golden sand. However, the Jiao dragon looked strange and looked a bit like a dragon. Han Fei couldn't help but frown. So, this Fish Dragon King was probably confused by his name and bloodline and yearned for creatures like dragons. However, he had never seen a dragon before, so he made such a weird picture of a Jiao dragon? In front of this wall, there was a big chair with a tortoise shell as its back and a crab's pincers as its support, like a throne piled up with steel. It could be seen that the Fish Dragon King was not only extremely proud, conceited, but also particularly narcissistic. If it was anyone else, who would pile up a throne in their own home, only people like the Fish Dragon King would do that. Seeing this throne, Han Fei suddenly had an urge to sit on it. Wait, why the hell should I sit on it? Suddenly, Han Fei's face changed slightly. Something was wrong. This was the side effect of the mind-manipulating technique. He had always thought that the reason he could act like the Fish Dragon King was because of his good acting skills. But at this moment, when Han Fei saw this ugly throne, he suddenly realized a question. Was it because of his good acting skills, or was it because of the Fish Dragon King's memory itself that influenced him? Before he used the mind-manipulating technique, Han Fei felt that he was much stronger than the Fish Dragon King, so there wouldn't be any problem. But now it seemed that there was still an impact. The old turtle has bad intentions. Fortunately, I only read the memory of one Fish Dragon King. However, Han Fei didn't panic. Anyway, he was going to play the Fish Dragon King now, so he had to sit on the throne. Han Fei sat cross-legged on the throne, casually flipped open a piece of fish skin in front of his knees, and revealed a switch. After turning it on, there was a sun-moon shell and 3 sea-swallowing seashells inside. Han Fei couldn't help but grin. Sure enough, rich people are different. Sun-moon shells were popular in the Shuemu sky. And this was when the Fish Dragon King went to the front line and had brought a lot of resources. Otherwise, there should be more resources here. Half an hour later, Han Fei counted the number of resources he had obtained. There were 5 million caddies of spiritual spring. The combined resources of just 4 heavenly talents from the Baibei Royal City were not much less than that of the Free Valley of the Iceberg City. In addition, there were more than 800,000 caddies of spirit awakening fluid. This was not a lot. It was estimated that these people might have already cultivated their companion spirit. After all, sea demons seem to only have one companion spirit, and no other creatures seem to have contractual spiritual beasts except for human beings. There were 10,821 spiritual energy fruits, 8,645 energy fruits, 482 poisonous and detoxifying fruits of various colors, and 566 spiritual fruits. There were 2 high-quality divine weapons, 13 mid-quality divine weapons, and as many as 42 low-quality divine weapons. There were more than 80 high-quality divine weapons. As for the other materials, they had to be counted in tons. After all, a lot of resources were needed to refine a good weapon. In addition to these basic items, there were more than 120 combat skills of sea demons. There were more than 60 fish skin maps. Han Fei searched in his mind and found that there were only 5 places that hadn't been marked by the Life Queen. Unfortunately, Han Fei didn't have time to explore secret realms now. He could only go there when he had the chance. What if the water fairy's body was there? According to the sea map given to him by the Life Queen, the target was actually very clear, which was the Baibei Royal City and the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. However, how could the people of the water would heaven enter these 2 places? Fortunately, Han Fei appeared. He had many tricks and could even turn into a sea demon. How could the Life Queen not use such a free talent? However, Han Fei checked the sea map and finally determined that the locations of these places were within 200,000 kilometers of the Baibei Royal City. It wasn't that Han Fei didn't believe it, but that these places were too close to the Baibei Royal City. If the water fairy's body was here, with so many venerables, Tao-seeking state demons, and even kings, how could they not discover the secret realms nearby? Throwing away these treasure maps, Han Fei was a little annoyed. It seemed that he had come to a disadvantage. The water fairy said that he could sense her body within 10,000 kilometers with the lotus petals. But now the entire royal city was only 50 kilometers long and wide. If he had to count the entire abyssal chasm, it should be less than 10,000 kilometers. It could be seen that the water fairy's body wasn't in the Baibei Royal City. He had to find an opportunity to explore the 500,000 kilometer radius of this place. Otherwise, he would have to find a way to escape from the Baibei Royal City and go to the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. After sorting out the resources, Han Fei didn't have time to use them, nor could he deduce anything in the Baibei Royal City. Having no choice, Han Fei could only begin to practice the demon god scripture. This technique was quite extraordinary. If a king saw it, they would probably think that the reason for his rise was related to this technique. In that case, he would successfully deceive another king. Naturally, Han Fei couldn't make another breakthrough here. After all, he had just advanced to the Tao-seeking state and hadn't even consolidated it yet. And his real strength was already at the peak level of a junior explorer. This speed was already extremely fast. After all, the explorer realm was no longer the sea demon realm. It wasn't something that could easily rise to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th level just because you had enough resources. However, at this stage, he needed to lay a solid foundation in order to become an intermediate explorer. Half a month later. Gui Sanqing stood outside the courtyard and said, "Young master, it's time for the trial." Han Fei suddenly got up. He had already stuffed all the resources into Forge the Universe, so that he could feel at ease. Outside the gate, a half-mermaid said respectfully, "Master Dragon King, I'm here at the order of Venerable Changshui to invite you to the trial field." Han Fei's heart slightly moved. After waiting for half a month, the trial finally came. Chapter 1275. The trial grounds of the Sea Demon King City were a bit like the Thousand-Star Trial Ground and the 3 Holy Lands in the Thousand-Star City. The difference was that these trial secret realms didn't have strange things like memory loss. In the center of the Baibei Royal City there were 5 teleportation arrays. According to the difficulty of the trial, they were divided into easy, normal, hard, purgatory, and forbidden areas. According to the color of the teleportation arrays, they were white, green, blue, purple, and black. Each of the 5 teleportation arrays was about 100 meters in diameter. Among them, people often went in and out of the easy and normal teleportation arrays. In the Baibei royal city, everyone had to go to the trial, which was a mandatory requirement. Therefore, under normal circumstances, these trial secret realms were always kept open in case of inconvenience. About 80% of the residents of the Baibei royal city wandered between the easy and normal trials, which meant that a few people would go in and out of the arrays most of the time every day. Of course, teleportation arrays were just teleportation arrays. Behind each teleportation array, there was more than one trial secret realm. As long as you entered the teleportation array, it meant that you had chosen this difficulty. As for which trial you wanted to go to, no one cared whether it was difficult or not. When Han Fei arrived, this semi-venerable expert seemed to have been waiting for him. Seeing Han Fei's arrival, this person took a deep look at the Fish Dragon King, and then nodded slightly. Because few people go to the forbidden trial ground, most people don't know much about it. I'll go with you and give you some answers. Han Fei was a little indifferent. This person was named Yu Tianxin. He was very strong and was known as the top Dao-seeking expert in the Baibei royal city. He didn't expect that this person was also responsible for the opening of the forbidden trial ground. Han Fei nodded. In that case, thank you very much, Master Tianxin. In front of the teleportation array, there happened to be a group of about a dozen people who seemed to be going to the trial ground together. However, as soon as they arrived, they were surprised to see the Fish Dragon King and Yu Tianxin, the top Dao-seeking expert in the Baibei royal city, standing in front of the black teleportation array, which was the forbidden trial ground. Then, under the gazes of the others, the two of them actually walked in one after the other. They could only see black light flowing and a dense fog covering the place. Where were the two of them? However, the 12 or 13 people were all stunned. It was not the first time that the trial field had been used, but they had never seen the teleportation array in the Forbidden Land being used. How could it be used this time? Someone exclaimed, "Who was that just now? He actually went to the Forbidden Land trial ground." Someone had a complicated look on his face. "Looks like you haven't been here for long enough. You don't even know the Ichthyosaur King. He's famous for being arrogant and condescending." Someone sighed and said, "Didn't the Ichthyosaur King just fight with Prawn Yue? It seems that its strength is still inferior to Prawn Yue's. Is it going to the forbidden ground now?" Someone shook his head slightly. How could it be that easy to pass the forbidden area trial grounds? This Ichthyosaur King is arrogant and conceited. I don't think he has much chance of surviving. When Han Fei followed Yu Tianxin into the trial field of the forbidden area, he saw a cliff full of weird wrinkles, on which there were 4 dark caves. Each of the 4 caves had a name written above them. They were Well of the Abyss, Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Thunder Prison, Sea of Divine Demons. Just by looking at the names, Han Fei knew that none of the 4 places seemed to be simple. Otherwise, they wouldn't be called the Forbidden Land Trial Grounds, a place that even heavenly talents had a slim chance of surviving. In the memory of the Ichthyosaur King, there was no memory of any of the 4 places. Therefore, when Han Fei saw the 4 trial grounds, he couldn't help but be stunned. They looked too weird. However, before Yu Tianxin said anything, Han Fei suddenly felt that the lotus petal in Forge the Universe that the water immortal left for him trembled slightly. Han Fei was shocked and his heart surged. Did I come to the right place? As if noticing Han Fei's shock, Yu Tianxin said lightly, "This is the Forbidden Land trial grounds that you want to come to. There are only 4 places in total. Since you insisted on taking a try, now that your wish has been fulfilled, I can briefly explain it to you." Yu Tianxin pointed to the Well of the Abyss and said, "That secret realm is an extremely deep undersea cave. There is a universe inside the cave, which is connected to a certain big abyss on the Wall of Death. There are sea beasts running amok there. They don't care whether you are a sea demon or not. In their eyes you are just food." Han Fei couldn't help but be surprised. Connected to the Wall of Death? Yu Tianxin smiled faintly. Although the wall of death is terrifying, not everything is extremely terrifying. Although the well of the abyss is connected to the wall of death, since this place has been opened up as a trial ground, there will be opportunities for trials, and there won't be creatures that are stronger than you. Of course, not all places in the trial ground can be explored, so there should be many special places where powerful sea beasts may exist. Han Fei looked solemn. So, it is very likely that there are unknown existences beyond the scope of our ability in the Forbidden Land trial grounds? Yu Tianxin said, the premise is that you can resist the temptation and don't explore some places that you can't reach. Han Fei's eyes directly crossed the well of the abyss and looked at the demon-subduing tower. Yu Tianxin said, the demon-subduing tower is the Forbidden Land closest to the wall of death. As the name suggests, it's a place to suppress sea demons and fierce beasts. However, the sea beasts and big demons here come from the wall of death. Han Fei couldn't help but be shocked. Can the creatures in the wall of death come out? Yu Tianxin said, the wall of death is just a kind of restriction of the Almighty after all. But any restriction will have some problems after a long time. The wall of death has been here for countless years. Isn't it normal that some small fish and shrimps occasionally leak out? Han Fei asked, are the sea demons of different strengths locked together? Yu Tianxin shook her head. Of course not. The tower is actually a cave, and the cave is naturally divided into different levels. The demon-subduing tower is an ancient place that existed before the White Shell Royal City. The king tried to enter it, but also sensed the danger from the bottom of the demon-subduing tower, so he failed. Han Fei's eyelids twitched and he was dumbfounded. Seeing Han Fei's expression, Yu Tianxin smiled casually. Don't panic. That's the bottom of the demon-subduing tower. It's not a place that you and I can reach. The demon-subduing tower is divided into different levels according to the strength of the sea demons and fierce beasts it suppresses. There are 9 levels from top to bottom. They correspond to the sea spirit state, the peak stage of the sea spirit state, the Tao-seeking state, the peak stage of the Tao-seeking state, the demi-venerable state, the venerable state, the peak stage of the venerable state, the demi-king state, and the king state. As she spoke, Yu Tianxin couldn't help but look at Han Fei. I have to say that this demon-subduing tower is the most unsuitable for you. If you were still in the sea spirit state with your talent, it would be very likely for you to break through it. However, you have reached the Tao-seeking state. You are the weakest among the 3 Tao-seeking states, and you may be torn apart if you enter it. Han Fei's heart did a flip. He hoped that the water deity wasn't in this demon-subduing tower. This was a place that could even suppress kings, so how could he possibly do anything to it? Logically speaking, going to the 5th level might be his limit, let alone a king state. Seeming to be very sure that Han Fei wouldn't choose the demon-subduing tower, Yu Tianxin looked at the Thunder Prison and said, I'm not sure about this Thunder Prison. I can only say that Master Hai Tinglei cultivated here. Han Fei was slightly stunned. Master Hai Tinglei still needs to go to the Forbidden Trial Field? Yu Tianxin said lightly. It's more like a training field than a trial field. In this space, what you have to face is endless lightning. The deeper you go, the stronger the lightning will be. It is said that you can see the creatures in the lightning at the end. In the end, Yu Tianxin pointed to the Divine Demon Sea. Among the 4 forbidden secret realms, the first 3 have their own characteristic. The safety of the Divine Demon well can be high or low. It all depends on your luck. The demon-subduing tower has experienced countless years of accumulation. It can be said that no matter which level you go to, the creatures you meet must be extremely powerful. In the Thunder Prison, as long as you are confident that you can withstand the lightning, it is relatively the least dangerous. Han Fei couldn't help but narrow his eyes. What about the Divine Demon Sea? Yu Tianxin said lightly, the Divine Demon Sea is in the Wall of Death. Pooh! Han Fei looked at Yu Tianxin in shock. Are you kidding me? I can go to the Wall of Death? Yu Tianxin curled her lips. Don't look at me. I said that the wall of death has been sealed for too long. It's possible that a place is accidentally damaged. The Sea of Gods and Demons was such a place. It was just that the king had used special methods to reconstruct the seal and repair the damaged areas. The disadvantage is that the king will use some unknown method to reflect the creatures in the wall of death. Also, it may not be one, but a group. Han Fei. Hearing Yu Tianxin's explanation, Han Fei was speechless. It didn't sound simple at all. If there was a suitable place, it would be the Thunder Prison. This place was definitely suitable for his cultivation. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "How long can I stay in the Forbidden Secret Realm?" Yu Tianxin said lightly, "There is actually no limit. If I have to set a time, it will be 7 days in the Well of the Abyss and the Demon Subduing Tower, 3 days in the Thunder Prison, and 1 day in the Divine Demon Sea. The reason why I set this time is to confirm that you are still alive." Han Fei keenly grasped the word, "no limit," and couldn't help but ask, "No limit?" Yu Tianxin said, "The purpose of setting the time is to confirm that you are still alive. If you think you can stay in there all the time, you can come out first and explain the situation to Master Changshui Qin. Then you can go in again." Chapter 1276. Han Fei glanced at the lotus petal in Forge the Universe. Except for the slight tremble at the beginning, the lotus petal didn't move at all. As if he knew what Han Fei was thinking, the old turtle's voice sounded. "It's not because your master is within 10,000 kilometers of you, but because your master is in one of the 4 forbidden areas, and these forbidden areas may be very far away from you. But because of the teleportation entrances, the lotus petal can sense it. You just need to walk through the 4 entrances to know." Han Fei immediately understood that he had already chosen his way. No matter which forbidden area the water deity was in, he would choose the Thunder Dungeon. Because of his physique, the Thunder Dungeon wouldn't let him die. Besides, after choosing the Thunder Dungeon, he might be able to cultivate faster. After all, he had the Spirit Spring water and energy fruits on him. He was not lacking in anything. With the help of the thunder, he might even be able to improve his indestructible body. Yu Tianxin looked at Han Fei. "Have you made up your mind?" Han Fei walked straight to the Well of the Abyss. Yu Tianxin wasn't surprised by Han Fei's choice. After all, although the Well of the Abyss was dangerous, a good choice might help him avoid most of the dangers. However, when Yu Tianxin saw Han Fei walk to the entrance of the Well of the Abyss, he turned around and walked directly to the Demon Sealing Tower. Yu Tianxin couldn't help but frown. Although the Demon Sealing Tower is the place with the most opportunities, it's definitely the most dangerous place. It's extremely dangerous for you to go in with your strength. However, Han Fei didn't listen to Yu Tianxin. Instead, he concluded that the water deity wasn't in the Well of the Abyss. When he walked straight to the entrance of the Demon Sealing Tower, the lotus petal in Forge the Universe slightly trembled again. Han Fei glanced at Yu Tianxin calmly and said, "I'm not choosing myself. I'm letting my bloodline choose." Yu Tianxin couldn't help but frown. "Bloodline has this function? Don't bully me because I don't have a bloodline. My bloodline is not necessarily worse than your Dragon King bloodline." However, when he saw Han Fei continue to walk in the direction of the Thunder Dungeon, he couldn't help but smile secretly. The Thunder Dungeon and the Divine Demon Sea were more dangerous than the first 2. However, Yu Tianxin saw Han Fei suddenly stand still at the entrance of the Thunder Dungeon and look into it. He stood there for about 10 seconds, and Yu Tianxin didn't know what he was thinking. Han Fei thought to himself that the acting should be enough, so he turned back. "I choose the Thunder Dungeon." Yu Tianxin narrowed her eyes. "Are you sure? Although the Thunderbolt Prison only has the Thunderbolt Baptism, you should know that the time limit is 3 days. This also meant that the Lightning Prison was actually a more dangerous place than the Well of the Abyss and the Yao Sealing Tower. Second only to the Godfiend Sea." Han Fei said proudly, "I choose the Thunder Prison." Yu Tianxin knew that the Fish Dragon King was a heavenly talent no matter how arrogant and bad-tempered he was. Since they were geniuses, they naturally had their own perseverance. Han Fei didn't know why the Fish Dragon King was so confident to enter the Thunder Dungeon. Maybe it was because of his bloodline, or maybe it was because of his luck. Anyway, he was just showing the way for him. After all, there were very few people who would propose to enter the trial field of the Forbidden Area. Therefore, he had to treat every one of them seriously. No one would joke about their own life. Without strength, they wouldn't be able to come out after entering. Those who were strong, such as the Fish Dragon King, were more or less confident. However, it was hard to say whether they were confident enough to make it through. But if the Fish Dragon King made it through, he would be the center of attention. Seeing that Han Fei had made his choice, Yu Tianxin threw out a small seal and said, "Master Chang Shuai-Qin said that he would give you a chance. This is an attack that he sealed. Ordinary people don't have this chance. If you weren't forced to go through the tribulation by Shark Maru and the others, Master Chang Shuai-Qin wouldn't help you. This thing can probably save your life. Take care. I will wait for you here for another 3 days." Han Fei caught the small seal and said, "What if I don't come back in 3 days?" Yu Tianxin said, "I personally can wait for 1 more day. If you don't return in 4 days, I can basically assume that you have already died. The teleportation formation that leads to the forbidden trial field will be closed. I won't wait for you anymore." Han Fei couldn't help but pretend to frown. What if I was just delayed? Yu Tianxin shook her head slightly. Under normal circumstances, that possibility is very small. Although it's not impossible, I have already given you 1 day. If you still haven't come out, the probability of you dying is much higher than the probability of you being delayed. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you going to go in and have a look?" Yu Tianxin couldn't help but sneer. Different levels of strength will lead to different situations after entering. The demon-subduing tower clearly distinguishes levels. But in the other 3 forbidden areas, this distinction is very vague and hard to determine. But one thing is for sure, after I enter, the scene will be different from yours. Let's not talk about whether I can find you or not. The question is, why should I save you? Han Fei pondered for a moment and asked, "How often does the Forbidden Area's trial field open?" Yu Tianxin chuckled. "Don't you know? Of course, it will only open when someone wants to challenge you. Why open it when there is no challenge? You should know that 5 years ago, Bei Nan challenged the Forbidden Area's trial field and returned with serious injuries. But because of that, he ranked 3rd on the top 10 heavenly talents list. Don't you know?" Han Fei's expression didn't change. "Of course I know. I was just asking. Okay, I know the rules. Let's go." He didn't chat with Yu Tianxin anymore. He didn't even look at the last divine demon sea. A secret realm that could reflect the creatures on the Wall of Death, the most difficult place among the 4 forbidden areas. He would only go there if there was a hole in his head. Holding the small seal, Han Fei walked to the entrance of the Thunder Dungeon. Of course, this was also a teleportation array. Otherwise, the lotus petal wouldn't have just trembled. The reason why he didn't choose to go to the demon-subduing tower at the beginning was mainly that he could tell from Yu Tianxin's explanation that the creatures in the demon-subduing tower had been accumulated over countless years. Even if they were raising poisonous insects, there wouldn't be any weak ones. If he went there, he would be at the Tao-seeking state, which was located on the 3rd floor of the demon-subduing tower, combining the 3 realms of elementary, intermediate, and advanced. Although he shouldn't be unable to withstand it, this was the one that he had the least reason to choose. If he really went there, he was afraid that some people would suspect him, and he would be the focus of attention. Then even if he wanted to run away, it might be a problem. As for the teleportation array that Yu Tianxin said would be closed, Han Fei was not so worried, because when Hai Tinglei got there, Han Fei heard him punished by Wushu and Yu Qing, who ambushed him, to guard the demon-subduing tower for 30 years. If that place was not the forbidden area, then there must be other ways. Han Fei couldn't help asking the old turtle, "If I stay here, is there any way to get out?" The old turtle couldn't help but say, "How would I know? But there's no secret realm in the world that can't be broken, but it's not hard to say. It's normal to be trapped for 1,000 or 800 years. Han Fei was speechless. Trapped for 1,000 or 800 years. I can only stay in the Shuemu heaven for a total of 3 years. More than 5 months have passed. Time is running out. Han Fei immediately made up his mind to go out in 3 days, but he would delay him for 2 hours to prove that he could break the rules. As for what to do next, he would wait for 3 days. Han Fei went straight into the cave of the Thunder Prison. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. As soon as Han Fei appeared, 2 bolts of lightning struck down heavily, making him tremble all over. Han Fei was speechless. I haven't even seen where the hell is, and the lightning has already started? When Han Fei took a closer look, his face was full of surprise and astonishment, but as far as his eyes could see, there was only darkness. And in this dark sky, dense lightning flashed, one after another, illuminating this place that seemed to extend out of infinite darkness. Huh! Han Fei had just recovered from his shock when he heard the old turtle suddenly exclaim. Boom! Han Fei was hit by another bolt of lightning. If he guessed right, the probability of him being struck by lightning here was only once every few seconds. According to the calculation that each bolt of lightning had about the power of a junior explorer, Han Fei couldn't help but click his tongue. No wonder it was called the Forbidden Trial Field. He had just come in and stood at the door, and it was already like this. What would he do later? Of course, Han Fei could also stay at the door for 3 days and then go out. But would Yu Tianxin really not spy on him? Or would no one really inspect him after he went out? However, it was not important whether anyone would inspect him or not. Even if he stayed at the door, the lightning would strike every few seconds for 3 days and 3 nights in a row. Even he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Even ants could bite an elephant to death, let alone lightning.